Chapter 631. Luopa naturally agreed with this point. He fully supported the sixth young master's suggestion and expressed that there was no need to rush the expansion. He would do it steadily and make sure that every cold front that came would be a cold front. The strength of the elites would not decrease, but would only increase. Yang Chendong was not worried about Luopa. This person was able to stand out from the other officers and become the next regiment commander after Lung Song. Now that he had the qualifications, no one would say anything about him becoming the 2nd Division commander. After arranging this matter, it was time to leave. Before leaving, Yang Chendong had a long talk with Luan Shaochen. He put forward some very useful suggestions for the future development of Laos. After that, he waved his hand and left Vientiane with nearly 4,000 mercenaries. He went to Yunnan province by land and met with Song Zhe, the governor of Yunnan province. After giving Song Zhe his approval and support, he boarded the ship at the harbor outside Tsui City in Yunnan province and headed north along the sea. After nearly a year, Yang Chendong finally returned to the north of Great Ming Dynasty after stirring up trouble in the south. Overall, this trip to the south had been very fruitful. Invited by the southern Ming Dynasty, he first quelled the rebellion of the Yellow Bandits, then destroyed Jiaoji and Lancang and established 2 provinces, Vietnam and Laos. He dealt a big blow to the Phnom Penh Dynasty, flexed his muscles, and obtained a period of peace. Finally, he was going to return to the north. Standing on the deck of the naval warship, Yang Chendong looked ahead and planned every step in his heart. This time, he did not intend to enter Baiming's capital, Beiping City, when he returned to the north. His current identity was a little too sensitive. If he were to return now, it was very likely that it would cause unrest in the imperial court of the northern Ming dynasty. It was even possible that they would develop a strong sense of fear and give up on the battle with Wala. This was not the result he wanted. When he went to the south before, it was because he could not see any hope of expansion in the north. But even if the south was temporarily unable to expand, how could he possibly step in to stop a war that was about to break out in the north? The more intense the fight, the more he could fish in troubled waters and unknowingly develop and strengthen himself. Besides, the environment in the north this time was much better than the one in the south. When he went to the south, he was really in the dark and had to take things one step at a time. But now that he was in the north, he at least had a certain foundation. For example, the company commander of the Windchaser cavalry that he had sent to the grasslands 2 years ago had grown to a certain scale after a period of growth. Even in Baiming's newer Gandusi region, he had become a top figure. This time, Yang Chendong wanted to meet up with Windchaser. Presumably, with his support and participation, Windchaser's team would expand in a very short period of time and become a powerful force to enter the northern grasslands. The military ship headed north. The speed of the ship, which had been converted to steam power, was much faster. In just 5 days, they had traveled thousands of kilometers through the Korean Strait and arrived at a place called Haisheng. Haisheng was Vladivostok, which was occupied by Russia in the future. To the north was the Shuangqing Guards, and to the south was the Maoyan Guards. It belonged to the Great Ming's newer Gandusi. The neuter Gandusi was a local military organization set up by the Great Ming government in Heilongjiang, Asu River, today's Wassuli River, Songhua River, and Nayan River, today's Nan River. During Hongwu's reign, most of the Yuan dynasty officials in the newer Gandusi region surrendered to the Ming government. In the 9th year of Yongle 1411, the newer Gandusi was officially set up. It was the highest administrative organization in Heilongjiang and Wassuli River. The main officials of the Gandusi were transferred officials and later became hereditary officials. The Mongols, Jurchens, Jalimi, Ki, Dor, and other races all made a living by hunting and fishing. The Ming dynasty government also appointed the leaders of the various races to take charge of the various places and gave them seals. They followed their customs and gave them tributes from time to time. The tributes included gerfalcon, mink fur, horses, and other local products, which was similar to the inland taxes. The Newer Gandusi was set up in Newer Gandusi on the east bank of the Heilongjiang River. It was roughly 200 kilometers away from the Heilongjiang mouth. The officials and troops that were sent to the Newer Gandusi were all here. There were over 400 guards and troops stationed there. The area was east of the sea, northeast included Sakhalin Island, west of the Wonan River, Enan River, south of the Tumun River, and north of the Xing and mountains. It could be said that this was a place where good and bad mixed together. Because of the diversity of the ethnic groups, it was very difficult to manage this place. There were even some areas that were constantly in war. Various ethnic groups, and even some ambitious people wanted to expand their own forces here. In such a natural environment, Zhui Feng continued to develop and grow. When he first came here under Yang Qindong's orders, he was only a squad leader. Including himself, he only had 10 brothers. After such a long time, his team continued to grow, and now it had the scale of a regiment with 3 battalions and a regiment under its command. Zhui Feng had also been given the position of regiment commander. Ha! You became a regiment commander just like that. I hope you won't disappoint me. With a smile on his face, Yang Qindong thought of the matter mentioned in the Security Bureau report. The warship docked at the sea town. Before it reached the shore, it could see a black mass of cavalry approaching. From afar, there were at least 1,000 people. Prepare for battle. The third leader, Wu Sheng, shouted out reflexively. The 500 to 600 Lung Feng members and the guards on the ship quickly took out their guns and looked for a suitable position, adjusting the angle of the muzzle. It's fine. Yang Qindong was very satisfied with the performance of the Lung Feng. Then he waved his hand nonchalantly and looked ahead. This shouldn't be an enemy. As if to prove this statement, as soon as the voice fell, a large 5-starred red flag appeared in the middle of the cavalry. Naturally, the cold vanguard soldiers were no stranger to this flag. When they were on the sea with the Navy, they often used this flag. 3rd Regiment Commander, take a company of soldiers and check it out. Be careful. After Wu Sheng saw the red flag, he put away his gun, but his eyes were still cautious. Who knows if the enemy stole a 5-starred red flag to confuse him? After the 3rd Regiment Commander Chang Chunyang received the order, he took a company of Lung Feng to the shore and approached the cavalry. Through the binoculars, he saw that they said something, and then a small group of cavalry followed behind Chang Chunyang and approached the shore. Ha ha ha! With the existence of that qi in his heart, Yang Qindong's eyesight had reached an unimaginable level. When he was still 100 meters away, he laughed heartily. He had already recognized that the leader of the cavalry was Zhui Feng. It was indeed Zhui Feng's cavalry regiment. He came to see town first after receiving the information from the Security Bureau. Not only that, but he also made the decision to ask the people here to leave. He even sent a military officer to patrol the surrounding 20 miles. In his opinion, the 6th young master's arrival should be a secret. He probably didn't want more people to know about it. So naturally, this matter couldn't be leaked. After asking the people nearby to leave, Zhui Feng began to wait for the 6th young master to appear. In his heart, the 6th young master was his life's benefactor. In the past, he didn't have enough to eat or wear. He didn't even know where he would live the next day, whether he could still fill his stomach or whether he could still persevere and survive. But after meeting Yang Qindong, everything changed. Not only did he not have to worry about eating and wearing clothes, He also learned how to read and read. He knew that people didn't only live to fill their stomachs, but also to have more pursuits. Ever since he was born, he had been raising horses for those old masters. Xue Feng's greatest pursuit in life was to have his own home one day, to be able to shelter him from the wind and rain, to have his own wife and children, to complete the family line, and to have a horse that belonged to him. It didn't have to be tall and handsome, but he would definitely take good care of it. Every day, he would use water to wash the horse very clean. Occasionally, when he had nothing to do, he could ride the horse for a walk. That was already very happy, but these thoughts could only be wishes, and he could only think about them in his heart. If he didn't even have enough to eat, how could he talk about raising his wife and children? And all of this changed because of Yang Qindong. All of his wishes were quickly realized. Following this, Xue Feng's life ideals also changed. It turned out that he could also create some achievements. Not only did he bring glory to his ancestors, he didn't even know who his parents were, but at least he could let his children have a better life in the future and not have to worry about food and clothing. Under Yang Qindong's guidance, he was fortunate enough to become Xue Feng of the Cold Front, and his life changed. Because he knew horses and was good at training them, and his military skills were good, he finally became the squad leader of the Cold Front. He was sent to the north, where most of the terrain was plains. This completely changed his life and gave him the space to display his talents. Today, he was no longer a youth who had to worry about his stuttering. He was already the commander of an army that commanded more than 1,000 people. But no matter what his identity had changed when he knew that the sixth young master was coming, he was still very excited. At this moment, he followed behind the Spring Sun Camp commander, and his heart beat a lot faster. He didn't even know what to say when he saw the sixth young master. Before the situation became clear, the warship only threw down a plank to disembark and didn't completely reach the shore. Xue Feng walked up the plank to the deck of the warship and stood in front of Yang Qindong. "Greetings, sixth young master." Almost instinctively, Xue Feng stood at attention and saluted, showing a sense of competence. Chapter 632. Not bad. It's a bit darker, but it looks more sturdy. Raising his right hand, Yang Qindong smashed Xue Feng's right chest. This had become Yang Qindong's signature move. Even though everyone who was hit would feel a burning pain in their chest, no one complained about it, because they knew that this was the sixth young master's way of showing intimacy with them. What other people didn't even have the right to be hit like this. Xue Feng, who was praised, chuckled and revealed a silly smile. Then he thought of something and turned around to introduce the people behind him. "Sixth young master. This is 1st Battalion Commander Deng Yu, 2nd Battalion Commander Gao Danhua, and 3rd Battalion Commander Ma Xiangshan." Deng Yu and Gao Danhua were originally soldiers of Cold Front. The 6th young master definitely has an impression of them. It's just that this Ma Xiangshan joined later. However, this person's horsemanship is extremely good, and his riding skills are also very good. He is also very good at commanding troops in battle, so he was promoted to the position of 3rd Battalion Commander. Of course, the appointment of the 3 battalion commanders still needs to be approved by the 6th young master, the military, and the political department. Xue Feng had indeed been trained. At least he knew that there were things that he couldn't decide. He needed to request approval from his superiors. Not bad. Deng Yu and Gao Danhua, your performance was also very good. As for your appointment, I can give you an answer now. It's approved. Yang Qindong had a smile on his face. These 3 people were the first 10 people to be sent here. Their backgrounds had already been investigated when they were in Crimson City. There would not be any problems, so he could directly appoint them. As for this Ma Xiangshan, he didn't know him, So he still had to follow the procedures. He couldn't casually make an exception. Deng Yu and Gao Danhua, who were called out, were naturally excited. This was an appointment approved by the sixth young master. Their identities and positions were stable. Ma Xiangshan, who wasn't called out, had an ugly expression. Then he made a shocking move. Sixth young master, I want to challenge you to a duel on horseback. Do you dare? The words were shouted by Ma Xiangshan. Perhaps it was because he felt wronged and wanted to vent. However, he pointed the spearhead at Yang Chendong, which was something that no one could tolerate. How dare you? Kneel and accept your fate. Take him down. More than one person shouted. Then, one person after another jumped out. Among them were the officers of the 3rd Regiment of the 1st Division, as well as the captains and members of the 1st and 2nd Guard Squads. Even Hu Mang couldn't help but shout at this moment. Then, he wanted to take down this arrogant person. But before he could make a move, Beta Persei had already taken a step forward and threw a punch forward. Beta Persei was the eldest of the 5 young family members, and his position and power were second only to Tiger's man. His mission was to ensure the absolute safety of the 6th young master. Now that someone dared to speak rudely in front of him, he wouldn't be polite and threw a punch forward. The punch was so fast that many people didn't see what happened. The punch had already broken through the air and arrived in front of Ma Xiangshan. Unlike the others, when Ma Xiangshan shouted that sentence, he thought of all kinds of possibilities, so he was prepared. Because of this, when Beta Persei's punch came, he quickly dodged to the side. Then, with his agility, he really dodged the punch. Beta Persei wasn't surprised that his punch missed. If a person who dared to shout in front of the young master didn't have any strength, he would look down on him. But it didn't matter that he dodged the punch. He suddenly swung his right arm to the right, and the punch turned into a swing punch. The momentum was so fast and fierce that even Ma Xiangshan didn't expect it. Bang! After the punch, Ma Xiangshan flew out and flew to the deck 3 meters away. He fell to the ground with a bang. Just from the way he landed on the ground, one could tell how powerful that punch was. Take him down. Tiger's mane quickly responded. With the order, a team of guards, Ba Daojiang and Peng Yu, grabbed Ma Xiangshan, who fell to the ground, and then stood him up. They looked at him with a murderous look. It seemed that as long as the 6th young master gave the order, the 2 of them would chop him up and throw him into the sea to feed the fish. Ma Xiangshan, who was restrained, first took a deep breath. After feeling the pain in his chest and not leaving any internal injuries, his eyes fell on Yang Chendong. He then said with a provocative look, "What? You don't dare? You really don't know how to write the word death." Tiger's mane saw Ma Xiangshan provoking the young master again and again. He was already furious and threw a punch at Ma Xiangshan's lower abdomen. Bang! Ba Daojiang and Peng Yu held Ma Xiangshan tightly. The punch was solid. Ma Xiangshan's body shrank into a ball. He opened his mouth and breathed heavily. Obviously, the punch was so heavy that he couldn't speak. Wind Chaser, Deng Yu, and Gao Danhua, who were standing opposite, were so scared that they couldn't speak. Usually, Ma Xiangshan was very low-key and didn't talk much. He was very calm. How could he become so easily angered at this moment? He actually challenged the authority of the 6th young master again and again. Did he really want to die? Among the 3, Wind Chaser was the most difficult. He naturally respected the 6th young master, but at the same time, he also appreciated Ma Xiangshan. He was a native here. Not only was he familiar with the terrain and environment, but he also had Zhang Yuqi to command the battle. Every time, he would lead the charge. It could be said that he was both a brave and a wise general. Such a person was rare. Even Deng Yu and Gao Danhua couldn't compare to him. And now, this person destroyed his own future just because he challenged the sixth young master. He felt that it was a pity. Of course, he didn't dare to say anything. He was very clear about his identity. He also knew that the authority of the sixth young master wasn't something that others could casually question. No one spoke. On the deck, there was only the sound of Ma Xiangshan constantly retching and Lung Feng glaring at him with murderous gazes. Perhaps in some people's eyes, Ma Xiangshan was already a dead man. They were only waiting for the sixth young master to give the order and hand him over to them. Then they would use all kinds of methods to make this person regret having a tongue and regret being able to speak. You want to challenge me? While everyone was waiting, Yang Qindong finally spoke. But it wasn't a condemnation. It was a question. Ma Xiangshan's physique was really good. Even though he was punched 3 times, the pain still persisted. It wouldn't go away for a few days, but he had already recovered his basic ability to speak. With the lesson just now, he didn't dare to challenge Yang Qindong. Fortunately, he had already achieved his goal, so he nodded after hearing this question. Well, you are very courageous. Since it's like this, I will agree. How about this? Seeing that you're injured, I'll give you 3 days to recuperate. After 3 days, we'll see who's the winner. Yang Qindong nodded lightly and actually agreed to the other party's challenge. This result naturally surprised everyone. Tiger's Mane and Beta Persei bluntly said, "Young master, you have a body of gold. How can you take such a risk?" Yes, sixth young master, Ma Xiangshan must have taken the wrong medicine. Don't take his words to heart. Windchaser and the others also quickly persuaded. Well, I have made up my mind. It's settled. By the way, in these 3 days, no one is allowed to find trouble with Ma Xiangshan. This young master wants a fair competition. Is that clear? Clear. Tiger's Mane and the others said reluctantly, but there was no other way. In their eyes, Yang Qindong's words were an imperial edict. No one dared to disobey. Ma Xiangshan was the first to get off the boat. He really needed to heal. The 3 punches just now were heavier than the previous one. It had seriously affected his movements. When Ma Xiangshan left, Windchaser immediately knelt down and asked for forgiveness. "Sixth young master, it's all my fault for not teaching him well. Please punish me." "That's right. Your soldiers are indeed too arrogant. That's not good. I'll punish you with half a year's salary and find a good horse for this young master." That shouldn't be a problem, right? Yang Qindong naturally didn't like to see subordinates offending their superiors. But Ma Xiangshan's matter was an exception. He had just arrived, and only a few people in this cavalry regiment were familiar with him. The others were probably not familiar with him. If he wanted to lead them, it would be very difficult if he didn't show a certain amount of strength. Since that was the case, he decided to use this opportunity to tell the cavalrymen how powerful the person they were following was. It was only a penalty of half a year's salary. This was nothing to Zhui Feng, who was alone. But he was curious about why the sixth young master was looking for a horse. Puzzled, he asked, "Sixth young master, what do you need a horse for?" "Of course it's for a competition. This young master has already agreed to Ma Xiangshan's request. I can't just stand on the ground and fight with him. Moreover, it's not just me. The other Lung Feng soldiers and auxiliary soldiers also need war horses. Living here, how can one live without a horse?" Yang Qindong spoke as if this was a matter of course. These words not only stunned Windchaser, but also Wu Sheng and the others behind him. "Sixth young master, we don't need it. We have bicycles to ride. Those things are very fast, and we don't need to eat food. Isn't that better?" Wu Sheng had never ridden a horse before. His soldiers also hadn't ridden a horse before. There was some resistance in his heart. Yes, sixth young master, you can live here without a horse. The various forces here also have infantrymen. This is very normal. Windchaser also explained. There was no other way. He didn't know about this before, so he didn't prepare so many horses. This was a hole for nearly 4,000 war horses. How could it be solved so easily? Chapter 633. Yang Qindong shook his head. I don't care what the other factions are like. Our cold front will either not do anything or be the strongest. It is a must for everyone to have their own war horse. In the future, everyone should have at least 2 or more. Yang Qindong did not mention the matter of the bicycle, although it did not require food. If it was used for a long period of time, it would inevitably have all sorts of problems. They were so far away from Crimson City that if a problem occurred, it would be impossible to fix it. Not to mention, riding a bicycle required a lot of stamina. It was fine to use it for a short period of time, but it was not as convenient as riding a horse. Yang Qindong's words were in order. Since he had made a decision, the others could only follow his orders. Fortunately, although Windchaser didn't have many war horses, he still had some. Coincidentally, there was a wild horse in their stable. No one could tame it. Even Windchaser took a long time to cultivate his feelings for it. Only then could he get close to it without being rejected. However, that horse was really tall and muscular. At a glance, one could tell that it was a fine steed. If it became Yang Qindong's mount, it wouldn't be a loss of face. When Windchaser reported the situation to Yang Qindong, his interest was immediately piqued. Oh, there's a war horse like that. Come, let's go take a look. The warship had already reached the shore. The soldiers were all disembarking and unloading the supplies. With everything in order, most of the officers had nothing to do. Everyone followed the 6th young master to the stable. The stable did not have a fixed location. Usually, wherever the main army was, it would be built there. Right now, Windchaser's main forces were all around Sea Town, so the stable was in the middle of the town. After disembarking from the ship, they arrived at the stable after traveling for 4 li. From afar, the pure white wild horse was so eye-catching. Just looking at it from afar, Yang Qindong fell in love with it. In his previous life, Yang Dong was an absolute soldier king. No matter if it was flying, running in the water, or walking on land, there was nothing he could not understand. However, he did not know much about war horses. Other than sometimes riding a horse in the race course to adapt to various roles in order to complete missions, he didn't have much contact with it. But what kind of horse was that? It had been trained and was very docile, unlike the horse in front of him. Before he even got close to him, he saw it constantly snorting, as if it was trying to keep people away. At the same time, its 4 hooves were constantly moving, as if it would give a kick to anyone who stepped forward. Good horse. Although he didn't know much about horses, this didn't stop Yang Qindong from liking it. He couldn't help but be eager to try. 6th young master, please wait a moment. I'll put the saddle on him. Windchaser sucked in a breath of cold air. He could see the desire to conquer in the 6th young master's eyes. But this horse was really not easy to tame. He had raised the horse since he was young, but after so many days, he could only get close to it. Usually, he had to personally deliver the horse feed for this horse. It didn't care about other people's food. It was very arrogant. Yang Qindong didn't speak. He focused all his attention on the white horse. He began to imagine riding on it and galloping the earth. Windchaser took a saddle from one of his soldiers and began to approach slowly. As he approached, he kept saying, white horse, you must be obedient. Although I know you don't like this thing on your body, aren't horses born to be ridden by people? Accept your fate. Accept your fate." Just like coaxing a child, Windchaser kept talking while approaching. He was very careful, as if the white horse would go crazy at any time. Tiger's Mane, Wu Sheng, and the others looked at this scene with a smile. They felt very interesting. After all, according to the sixth young master's intention, they would also need to ride horses in the future. There was no harm in understanding it in advance. Pung! Just when everyone's eyes were looking here, an unexpected scene happened. The originally restless white horse suddenly raised its hooves and kicked the approaching Windchaser without warning. Windchaser was too familiar with horses. A moment ago, he felt that the atmosphere was not right. When the horse raised its hooves, he suddenly retreated. Fortunately, the white horse was tied to a wooden stake. The distance it could move was limited, so it was able to avoid the attack. Just when everyone thought that it was a close call and applauded Windchaser's reaction, the scene suddenly changed. They saw that the wooden stake tied to the white horse was constantly moving. After a few moments, it was suddenly pulled up from the ground. Then the white horse neighed and rushed straight to Windchaser, who was closest to it. The horse borrowed the momentum of its hooves. With such a fast speed, everyone could imagine that once Windchaser was hit by the white horse, it would be a disaster. At this moment, even Windchaser himself was shocked. He first threw the saddle in his hand to the ground, then turned around and ran quickly. As a horse breeder, he naturally knew what would happen if the horse was frightened. Windchaser's speed was already very fast, just like his name. However, the white horse's speed was even faster. It fully utilized the strength of its legs, and when its forehooves landed, it covered a distance of several meters. In just a breath, it had already arrived behind Windchaser. Its pair of sturdy front hooves were raised high, and it directly smashed towards Windchaser's back. Once it fell, the 2,000 kilograms would be enough to break Windchaser's back. Even if that person could survive, he would be a cripple and unable to do anything. Pung! Just as everyone was shouting and Tiger Mang was about to pull out his pistol, a figure suddenly dashed past. Then, the white horse that was about to land suddenly stopped in midair. If one looked carefully, they would see that Yang Chendong was holding the rope that was tied to a wooden stake tightly in his hand. Just now, Yang Chendong felt the danger. His body suddenly rushed out and grabbed the rope, forcibly pulling the white horse. With such a pull, Yang Chendong's face couldn't help but turn red. The white horse was in its prime and belonged to the heavy horse breed. With a rough estimate, this horse was at least 2,300–400 kilograms, or even more. How could a person pull such a heavy weight? Feeling that at this moment his hands were about to bleed, Yang Chendong couldn't help sinking his qi into his dantian and mobilizing the qi in his body. Only then did he feel that his arms and body felt better. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Windchaser finally escaped from under the horse. But he was already covered in cold sweat. It was obvious that he was really scared. When he saw the white horse being held back by someone, he was naturally very unhappy. When he turned around and saw that the instigator of all this was Yang Chendong, he could not help but turn around and gallop over. The momentum of this run was as heavy as 10,000 pounds. "Don't shoot." Yang Chendong was looking at the white horse's eyes, but from the corner of his eyes, he noticed that Tiger's Mane, Beta Persei, and the guards had all taken out their guns. He quickly shouted, and then his body suddenly rushed to the side, avoiding the white horse's counterattack. The attack didn't succeed, and the white horse seemed to be angered. It continued to rush toward Yang Chendong's position, as if it wouldn't stop until it stepped on this person. With the support of qi, Yang Chendong was like a monkey, always able to avoid the white horse's attack at the last moment. At times, he would also counterattack, fiercely pulling the reins in his hand, bringing a trace of pressure to the white horse. One person and one horse fought a battle of wits and courage around the stable. Surprisingly, the white horse seemed to be quite intelligent. Sometimes it even knew how to make some fake movements, causing Yang Qindong to make mistakes. There were even a few times when it almost kicked the target because of this. Fortunately, the qi was indeed strong enough, especially now that he didn't need to use any strength. He only needed to dodge the white horse's attacks. This saved Yang Qindong a lot of energy, and the frequency of his counterattacks also became faster and faster. The sixth young master is so powerful. The scene in front of them had attracted more and more people to come here. When Lung Feng and the auxiliary soldiers saw the battle of wits and courage between the god of war and the white horse, they couldn't help but show a surprised expression. They only knew that the sixth young master's martial arts were very good, and his marksmanship was also very good. But all of this was just hearsay. Now that they finally had the chance to see it with their own eyes, everyone admired him in their hearts. In the blink of an eye, a quarter of an hour had passed. The white horse didn't have any intention of stopping its attack, nor did it show any signs of exhaustion. It was still incomparably brave and continued to attack. Relying on the qi, Yang Qindong dodged and counterattacked when the horse's hooves hit. He was also very brave and fierce. The man and the horse seemed to have reached a consensus, and that was they must use this opportunity to determine the winner. Using the qi to resist the power, Yang Qindong could feel that the qi in his body was constantly surging out of his body. After it filled his entire body, it entered his right arm, causing his body to slowly become stronger at this moment. Although this change wasn't very fast, it went over a long period of time. A quarter of an hour had passed, and the qi didn't have any intention of stopping. It was constantly strengthening his body. This feeling was very subtle, and it made Yang Qindong feel very comfortable. Even though he could already subdue the white horse, he didn't do so. He wanted to use this opportunity to stimulate his stamina and make his body stronger. Outsiders didn't know what was going on, so naturally they couldn't understand this. When they saw that Yang Qindong had already fought with the white horse for a quarter of an hour, and that the white horse was covered in sweat with a trace of blood, they couldn't help but worry for the sixth young master. Heavens! Why is that horse bleeding red? Is it going to die? A member of the guard team didn't know what was going on and shouted loudly, "What do you know? Only a Fergana horse would be completely red and even drip red sweat." Zhui Feng's subordinates who understood horses loudly explained. Chapter 634. Because of this answer, the others also turned their heads and looked at Wind-Chasing Wolf. Obviously, this person's speech on the horse could be called an expert and made people trust him. Feeling everyone's eyes on him, Wind-Chasing Wolf nodded, without hesitation. Yes, there is such a saying, but usually it is rare for a healthy horse to be red because of fatigue. As for the blood and sweat, it is only recorded in legends. Unexpectedly, this white horse is not red. It is also a pure Fergana horse. It was no wonder that Wind-Chasing Wolf said this. Although no one stipulated that a Fergana horse must be red, at least the probability was higher. A white horse becoming a Fergana horse was not recorded in the book. Everyone finally knew the reason why the white horse turned red, but because of this, they were worried about the sixth young master. This was not an ordinary horse. If Yang Qindong did not stop him, and was still so determined, they were afraid that Tiger's Mane and Beta Persei would have shot again. Time passed by little. After half an hour, Yang Qindong could clearly feel that the qi in his body had stopped. He reluctantly stopped the movements of his hands. At this time, his physique was more than twice as strong as before. He was full of confidence that if he made a move now, he could already control the white horse. But he did not do so. He also knew that the white horse was very tired after turning red and sweating. He was afraid that it could not exert its original strength. That being the case, it was better to let it have a good rest and fight again tomorrow. He wanted to take the opportunity to see if there would be any benefits, although it was very incredible to talk about such a strong physique. Yang Qindong even had datsang, so there was nothing to be surprised about. Too many illogical things had already happened. Even if that was the case, was there a need for one more or one less? Yang Qindong let go of the reins in his hand. White horse? No, it should be said that the red horse was standing there motionless and gasping for breath. Obviously, the fight just now was very tiring, and it should not have any extra strength now. Men, tie it up and serve it well. Don't neglect it. Yang Qindong exhaled a mouthful of turbid qi and laughed heartily. Immediately, someone came forward to tie up the horse. Wind-chasing wolf also took the opportunity to come over. Sixth young master, this horse is now very tired. It is time to subdue it. Wind-chasing wolf was also worried that Yang Qindong did not know how to subdue a horse, so he spoke out of turn. Wind-chasing wolf's general meaning was that now was the best time to subdue the horse. Once the red horse became a white horse and recovered, it would be difficult to do so. Yang Qindong knew that wind chaser meant well, but Yang Qindong had his own ideas, so he waved his hand heroically. It's fine. I have to subdue it when it's at its strongest. Only then can it truly submit to me. The sixth young master is mighty. When the others heard Yang Qindong's words, they all showed a look of admiration. This was their sixth young master. If he wanted to deal with someone, he would deal with the strongest. He would never take advantage of others. The news of Yang Qindong fighting the white horse by himself quickly spread. Everyone knew about this matter. For a time, many people felt admiration for the sixth young master. In front of these men who killed people as if they were drinking water, if one wanted them to sincerely submit, prestige and status were not enough. One also needed to have great strength. Obviously, Yang Qindong now had this kind of strength. Of course, it was not all words of admiration. In fact, the sixth young master was also very tired after fighting with the white horse for half an hour. He had to pretend to be magnanimous and decided to fight again tomorrow. This kind of saying was not only said by one person, but it was not a hindrance. Many people would even say that people would get tired to be able to fight with the white horse for half an hour without losing, and even win. Who could do it? These words were all heard by Tiger's Mane at night, and then he told Yang Qindong. In a temporary command tent, Yang Qindong was looking at the sand table and thinking about the next plan. Every time he went to a place, he would look at the map first. It had become a good habit for him. After all, if he did not even know the terrain and the various situations nearby, how could he talk about winning a battle? The strong would often think about how to use the terrain to win, and not passively wait for good luck to appear. Young Master, Tiger's Mane appeared and reported the various discussions he heard. This was one of Yang Qindong's requests. If he wanted to know more about the thoughts of the soldiers, he had to know what they usually said. Well, I know, Yang Qindong said. For him, this was not a problem at all. As long as he could finally subdue the uncontrollable white horse, it would be a fact, and all the discussions would disappear. By the way, all the supplies have been transported to the shore. The supplies Yang Qindong asked about were naturally war supplies, including clothing, food, shelter, transportation, and all kinds of weapons and ammunition. This time, if Yang Qindong wanted to enter the grassland to fight, it would be too far away from the sea. It would be unrealistic to think about replenishing supplies like usual, so this time he brought as much as he could to prepare for a long battle. It's all been transported to the shore. Commander Wu Sheng has also finished the handover work with the commander of the 2nd Marine Regiment, Long Yun Tian. It's too dark now, So the Navy decided to rest here for the night and prepare to leave early tomorrow morning. Tiger's Mane reported truthfully. This was the new, gone capital, the northern part of the great Ming dynasty. The sudden appearance of so many warships would scare many people. In order to not provoke them, the Navy's departure was inevitable. Come quietly, leave quietly. This was the order that Yang Chendong had given before. Okay, tomorrow morning you will represent me to send off Commander Long. Yang Chendong nodded, indicating that he knew about this matter. As a subordinate battalion commander, sending him off with the identity of Tiger's Mane was already giving him a lot of face. Yes, young master. Tiger's Mane replied. Seeing that there was nothing else, he left. Yang Chendong was left alone, looking at the sand table and sinking into deep thought. The next morning, Long Yun Tian's troops left with a dozen or so large warships. Tiger's Mane personally sent them off, causing the battalion commander to be a little excited. This matter was not a big deal for the 3rd Regiment of the Cold Vanguard, the Windchaser Cavalry Regiment, and the 6 auxiliary battalions led by Commander Lu Zhua. They put more attention on the White Horse. Some of the soldiers who did not have the opportunity to witness this scene yesterday rushed over. Even the still-injured cavalry regiment's 3rd Battalion commander, Ma Xiangshan, also rushed over. He also heard about yesterday's matter and was very curious about it. He naturally knew about the White Horse. He had tried to subdue it before, but unfortunately, he was unable to do so. And if Yang Chendong could do it, then presumably he would not need to use it in the following competition. With such great strength and the help of such a precious horse, it would be very difficult for him to be his opponent. After eating breakfast, there was already a sea of people outside the stable. Wherever there was space to stand, there would be people standing. They were all full of expectation as they waited for Yang Chendong to appear. When Yang Chendong appeared, there was a faint smile on the corner of his mouth. With so many people here, it was worth it for him to delay for a day to subdue the White Horse. He laughed heartily and fearlessly walked in front of the White Horse. When Yang Chendong appeared, the White Horse actually instinctively took 2 steps back. It was obvious that its intelligence was very high. It still clearly remembered that it was defeated by this man yesterday. No matter what the White Horse's performance was, Yang Chendong had already appeared. Then, he personally untied the reins, allowing the White Horse to regain its freedom. Then, he stretched out his large hand and pulled on the reins as if he wanted to compete. The White Horse, who had suffered a loss yesterday, did not immediately submit. Perhaps it still wanted to fight, so it struggled with all its might, wanting to turn the situation around. However, when faced with Yang Chendong's infinite strength, it was useless. After struggling a few times, it realized that the man in front of it did not move at all. The White Horse could not help but snort. Then it stood up with its front hooves as if it was about to step on a person. Ha, good timing. With a loud shout, Yang Chendong jumped up and accurately landed on the White Horse's back. As his body fell, a huge force pressed down, causing the White Horse's body to tremble. Then it desperately resisted and neighed. The White Horse knew that there were not many chances left for it to resist. If it could not flip this human off its back now, it was afraid that it could only choose to submit. As the king of horses, how could it be willing to be ridden by someone? It constantly twisted its body and even raised its front hooves, wanting to flip Yang Chendong off the horse. Unfortunately, no matter how hard it tried, Yang Chendong was like a rock, not moving at all. It was as if he was a part of the horse's back. Yang Chendong had already tried, and the increase in his physique that appeared yesterday was no longer there. In other words, if he wanted to rely on the White Horse to continue increasing his strength, he would not be able to do so. Since that was the case, there was no need to be courteous. He would just submit. Yang Qindong's attitude was resolute. Both of his hands tightly grasped the reins, and his legs would occasionally clamp down on the white horse's body. Every time he exerted a huge force, the white horse would feel a burst of soreness. It could endure it once or twice, but after a few times, it finally felt afraid. It also knew that this man was powerful. Being subdued by such a powerful man was not a shameful thing, and it would accept it. After acknowledging Yang Qindong's strength, the white horse finally stopped resisting and became quiet. Suddenly, there was a tsunami of cheers. The sixth young master had used his strength to subdue the white horse. Was this not worthy of their cheers? It was said that horses were not humans. They would fear your authority and status. They would only obey the strong. Chapter 6:35. Ha ha ha. Yang Qindong jumped down from the horse's back with a happy face. He finally conquered the white horse. Although the qi did not appear, he was still very happy. Yang Er waved his hand in the distance and walked out of the crowd. He took out a saddle that had been prepared beforehand and put it on the white horse. The white horse was surrendering, but it was only surrendering to Yang Qindong. Naturally, it would not give face to the approach of strangers. Its front hooves were constantly thrown, and it looked like it would kick whoever dared to come over. Well, this is my brother. In the future, when I don't have time, he will take care of you. Feeling the white horse's restlessness, Yang Qindong turned around and touched the horse's head. The intention of intimacy was very obvious. As if it enjoyed Yang Qindong's touch, the white horse quickly calmed down and let Beta Persei put on the saddle that imprisoned its freedom. Sixth young master, since the white horse has surrendered, why don't you give it a name? Good horses have names. Wind Chaser saw Yang Qindong succeed and said with envy. He did not have any thoughts of jealousy. The sixth young master subdued the white horse with his own ability. This was something he could not do. Well, I should give it a name. Why don't I call it White Dragon? Yang Qindong looked at the white horse's body and said after thinking for a while, White Dragon horse, good name. Suddenly, more than one person said flattering words. This may have the meaning of flattery, but the name was really good. But when someone mentioned the White Dragon horse, Yang Qindong's face could not help but be embarrassed. If it was the White Dragon horse, wouldn't he become Tang Sung? Yang Qindong subdued the White Dragon horse, making his image suddenly become tall. Ma Xiangshan, who was watching from the crowd, also walked out and knelt in front of Yang Qindong. Sixth young master, I offended you before. I'm sorry. I admit that I'm not your opponent. Haha, get up. Yang Qindong was in a good mood. He laughed heartily and helped Ma Xiangshan up. He asked with concern, How is it? Are you feeling better now? Yesterday, the young master sent someone to deliver the medicine to you. Have you taken it? Thank you, sixth young master, for your concern. I've already taken some of the medicine, and it's working very well. Ma Xiangshan said emotionally. This was not flattery. He was truly touched. He was the one who provoked the sixth young master. Not only did he not hold a grudge, he even sent someone to deliver medicine to express his concern. It just so happened that the other party's strength was so strong that even the white horse, no, even the White Dragon horse could be subdued. There should be no problem in dealing with him. If it was him who had strong strength facing the provocation of the soldiers below, he would definitely teach them a lesson. He would never be so low-key and patient. Just based on this, he sincerely admired Yang Qindong. Well, get better soon. We still have to go to the battlefield to kill the enemy. Yang Qindong patted the other party's arm with concern. From this moment on, he had completely subdued the other party's heart. The White Dragon horse had been subdued. The next step was to study the next battle plan. For this, Yang Qindong already had a plan in his heart. He announced the first military order after coming to the new Urgan City Department. That was, everyone had to learn to ride from the soldiers of the cavalry regiment. The time limit was only 10 days. After 10 days, those who learned how to ride and kill the enemy on horseback would enter the battle order. On the other hand, there were so many supplies that needed to be looked after. Those who did not know how to ride would enter the logistics camp. Speaking of supplies, Yang Qindong took out a shiny long saber. This saber had a wide back and a thin blade. The body of the saber was relatively heavy, which was good for increasing the strength of slashing. The blade was smooth, and the handle was slightly curved towards the blade. This kind of curved handle was easier for the rider to control and not easy to drop. For example, the sabers used by the Mongolian cavalry were thinner and lighter than the military sabers. The Mongolians' riding skills were exquisite. They mainly relied on the powerful impact of the horse's speed to drive the saber to complete the slashing and other tactical movements. The saber in Yang Qindong's hand was an improved version of the saber. It had more advantages. At the same time, the body of the saber was made entirely of steel, making it stronger and sharper. If it was a person with great strength, it was possible to cut the opponent's saber in half with one slash. There were also soldiers in the cavalry regiment who carried sabers. However, their sabers were not very sharp. Most of them were spoils of war, and some of them were seriously worn out. Now that there was a new saber that was so sharp in front of them, who knew how many people were tempted? Everyone looked at the shiny saber with a longing expression and drooled. Seeing the longing in everyone's eyes, Yang Qindong laughed and said, "Don't be anxious. Everyone has one. This young master also hopes that you can use this sharp saber to kill the enemy and show the might of our army." Kill the enemy. Show the might. Immediately, some people began to shout loudly. Then, their voices became unified, and they shouted together in an imposing manner. If you want to attack first, you must first sharpen your weapon. Without enough logistical support, although guns could still be used, they could not be used endlessly like before. Thus, the saber became a necessity. Yang Qindong started to look forward to the scene of them, riding on horseback and sweeping away thousands of enemies. The idea was beautiful, but when it came to training, the results on the first day were not as good as expected. The soldiers were used to fighting on land. When they suddenly rode on horseback, their legs could not exert force. Naturally, they were not used to it. Some of them even fell off their horses without doing anything. It was a laughable scene. Fortunately, the Cold Vanguard was made up of able-bodied men. They had a good foundation and rich battle experience. Even when they fell off their horses, they instinctively took precautions. Therefore, there weren't many casualties. After falling off their horses, more and more soldiers began to get used to the necessary skill of a cavalry. Yang Qindong was the same as the soldiers. He also began to train his equestrian skills. Although he was strong, had a strong physique, good endurance, and was very flexible, it did not have much to do with whether he knew how to ride a horse or not. If one wanted to fight on horseback and kill in all directions, one must learn how to kill on horseback. Ma Xiangshan, who was very experienced in this aspect, became the instructor for Yang Qindong, his guards, and the recon company. This time, when they came to the north to expand their territory and influence, scouts were essential, considering that the two provinces of Vietnam and Laos also needed scouts to explore the enemy situation as a response. This time there was only one reconnaissance company that followed Yang Chun to the north. The company commander was the original battalion commander, Su Yunsheng. This was not because Su Yunsheng had made a mistake. He just wanted to achieve more military achievements. Without a doubt, now that the war in the north was about to start, there were more opportunities here. Therefore, he used his authority to follow Yang Qindong's troops as a company commander. Yang Qindong knew Su Yunsheng very well. He was also happy to have him by his side. This way, he could save a lot of time. Now, the recon company was able to benefit. They were able to follow Yang Qindong and his guards to train their equestrian skills. Compared to the other cold front, the brothers of the recon company had a foundation in equestrian skills. Usually, when they were scouting for information, they would often complete missions on horseback. Therefore, when they first started, they were still a little arrogant. If it was not for the sixth young master beside them, they probably would not even look at Ma Xiangshan. After all, scouts had their own pride. Ma Xiangshan did not take the scouts, who had a foundation in equestrian skills, seriously. In the first class, he even said bluntly, maybe some people already know how to ride a horse and feel that they have a certain level of equestrian skills. But as your temporary instructor, what I want to say is that your so-called equestrian skills are extremely laughable in my eyes. What you know should not be called equestrian skills. At most, it is just riding a horse. These arrogant words naturally attracted the dissatisfaction of the scouts. There were even a few warriors who thought that their equestrian skills were good enough to provoke them. They looked as if they were saying, "Don't just say nice things. Let's compete if you have the ability." As for the challenge, Ma Xiangshan gladly accepted it. He came up with a plan, which was to see who could run the distance of 2 miles first. This was the most basic requirement of equestrian skills. After all, if both sides were cavalry, whoever was faster would obviously have a bigger advantage. It was just a 2-mile run. For cavalry, it was not a test at all. They could run it in the blink of an eye. Everyone understood this principle and accepted the test. Then, Tiger's Mane personally acted as the referee. After the order was given, several scouts who challenged Ma Xiangshan spurred their horses and ran wildly. They had received training before such a competition and thought that they were not worse than anyone. However, when they really started to gallop, they realized that Ma Xiangshan had already ridden away, leaving everyone with a distant back. They thought that even if they lost to Ma Xiangshan in a 2-mile race, the difference would not be too big. After all, the distance was very close. However, when the real competition started, these scouts realized that their strength was so far behind. After the competition, everyone recognized Ma Xiangshan's strength. The instructor began to integrate into the role, constantly talking about his understanding of equestrian skills and the things that needed to be paid attention to. For example, he first talked about the lightness and consistency when riding a horse. Horses performed best when they were relaxed and unrestrained, so the contact between the rider's hand and the horse's mouth must be very light. The pressure on the reins should not be more than a few ounces. The force on the hindquarters, including extra muscle movements. Horses would be like all living things trying to avoid work. If the reins were loose, it would easily avoid the rider's seat and leg support. If the rider succeeded in making the horse's hindquarters bear the weight, the horse's balance would be improved. The horse would raise its head and neck to reduce the pressure on the reins, and the rider could shorten the reins. If the rider grasped the correct bearing and riding scale, it would achieve the effect of man and horse as one. Chapter 636. The rider had to maintain a continuous impact. This could only be achieved if the rider's riding skills were good and their hands were still relative to the horse. If the rider could maintain a good state of communication with the horse, it would not be a problem to place their hands in front of the saddle or on the thighs. This would stabilize the hands. When the hands were free, the cavalry could swing the saber and continuously carry out actions to kill the enemy. From there, they could kill in all directions and achieve the final victory of the battle. Then he also talked about how to turn and stop while riding. Finally, he also talked about how to release the bow while riding. It could be done quickly and accurately. In short, This was a complicated process. Even if the cold front soldiers' ability to understand was not bad, it was not something they could learn in a mere 10 days. Some things they only needed to grasp the theory. Later on, they still needed to learn, master, and apply it on the battlefield. Yang Qindong also learned from Ma Xiangshan for 3 days. But after just 3 days, he had learned about 80% of what Ma Xiangshan had learned. Not only that, but Yang Qindong and the white dragon horse's tacit understanding had begun to develop. He could even do one difficult action after another on the horse's back. For example, his body hit on the side of the white dragon horse to avoid the enemy's long-range arrow attack. For example, he only had one foot on the horse's pedal, so his whole body could freely attack. He even did a difficult action that even Ma Xiangshan could not do. That was to jump into the air, kill the enemy, and then return to the white dragon horse's back. With the flexibility of the body and the complete cooperation of the white dragon horse, after only 3 days, Ma Xiangshan announced that the 6th young master had become the first outstanding student to graduate. This was not something that was given based on one's status or identity. Instead, it was an honor that was obtained based on one's talent. This naturally caused the soldiers to exclaim again and again. Then everyone became numb. It seemed that no matter what happened to the 6th young master, it was normal. 3 days later, Yang Qindong graduated and returned to the temporary command tent. He called Wind Chaser and asked about the progress of the matter. This matter was given to Wind Chaser by Yang Qindong 3 days ago. In view of the current situation, the first thing they had to solve was the problem of horses. According to Yang Qindong, it was too late to buy horses. Moreover, the quality of the newly bought horses was different, so it would take extra time to train them. Thus, it was better to just snatch other people's horses. Wind Chaser agreed with Yang Qindong's idea. After all, he didn't need 10 or 20 horses this time, but a total of 4,000 horses. If he wanted to rely on buying them, he didn't know how long it would take to complete the task. Since he had decided to steal a horse, he had to find a suitable target first. Coincidentally, there were 2 Ming Qianhu's posts on the left and right of High Town. Furthermore, there was also a great Ming dynasty's guard post on the south side. The guard post system was also known as the guard post system. It was the main military system of the Ming dynasty and was created by Ming Taizu. Its concept came from the Sui and Tang dynasties' Fu army system. The Qianhu post was also called the Qianhu guard post. It naturally referred to 1,000 households. The Qianhu post had 1,120 soldiers, and there were 10 Qianhu posts, each with 112 soldiers. Each post had 2 main banners, each with 50 soldiers. Each main banner had 5 small banners, each with 10 soldiers. The general of the Qianhu guard post was called the Qianhu guard post and was a grade 5 official. The guard post was bigger than the Qianhu post. There were 5 Qianhu posts on the left, right, middle, front, and back. The 5 Qianhu guards post consisted of 5,600 soldiers. The guard post was a grade 3 official. The commander Qianhu post was a grade 3 official. The commander Qianhu post was a grade 4 official. The guard post was a grade 5 official. According to the Great Ming Dynasty's military system, the positions of guard post and below were hereditary. From this point, it could be seen that the Great Ming Dynasty's military background was very important. Many people who became generals didn't know how to fight and only had a good background. Yang Qindong had no choice but to target the Baiming guard post. Although he didn't want to fight with Baiming right now, if he couldn't avoid it, he wouldn't be afraid to fight. Reporting to the 6th young master, in the past 3 days, I have sent people to investigate the guard post and the 2 Qianhu posts. Among them, The Shuangqing guard post has 300 healthy horses, the Maolian guard post has 300 healthy horses, and the Jianzhou left guard post has 2,000 healthy horses. Together, they have a total of 2,600 horses. Although it isn't enough to satisfy all of our requirements, it isn't far off. When the time comes, we will pay to buy some more, and the gap won't be too big. Listening to Zhui Feng speak so seriously, Yang Chendong seemed to be somewhat dissatisfied and shook his head. They have so many people, but they only have so few horses. If this was said by someone else, Zhui Feng would definitely scold them. What did they mean by only having so few horses? It was true that New Gandusi had a vast land source and abundant water plants, but there weren't many self-raised horses. Most of them were bought from other races. This also explained why in this area the Ming dynasty had the most people, but their combat strength wasn't the strongest. After all, not only did they need to buy healthy horses, but they also needed to buy horse materials and so on. Together, it was not a small expense. All right, no matter what, with these war horses, our strength will be greatly improved. As if he had thought it through, Yang Chendong finally nodded and agreed to make a move on these 3 places. From his words, it seemed like those horses had already become his. In fact, it wasn't difficult to do this. With the most advanced firearms and catching them off guard, there was no reason to lose. Now, the difficult part was how to mobilize these horses. Of course, Yang Chendong could take the initiative to attack the city, but if he did that, it would attract the attention of the Beiming imperial court. It was even possible that they would send troops in. If this was the case, it would reduce the pressure on the Walla army. This wasn't something that Yang Chendong wanted to see. Can you think of a way to mobilize them? Yang Chendong looked at Zhui Feng and asked, "This subordinate will think of a way." Zhui Feng knew that this was the time to test him. This was facing the 6th young master. He had to perform well. He didn't make any guarantees, nor did he say no. Zhui Feng went out of the tent to find his 3 battalion commanders and his company commander Ding Shan. He told them what the 6th young master wanted. The 4 of you are the backbone of the cavalry regiment. Now, tell me, do you have any ideas or solutions? Windchaser looked at the 4 subordinates with the same expectant gaze and asked with the thought that 3 heads were better than 1. The 4 people fell into silence. After about 2 or 3 minutes, 3rd Battalion Commander Ma Xiangshan and his company commander Ding Shan raised their heads at the same time and said in unison, "Selling horses." "Sell horses?" Zhui Feng was stunned at first, but he quickly recovered and a smile appeared on his face. "That's right, I'll sell the horses. Like this, Company Commander Ding Shan will complete this mission. If you need anything, the cavalry regiment will support you." The idea was thought of by 2 people. Windchaser did put the task on Ding Shan's head. This was not to favor one side, but in his opinion, Ma Xiangshan was still acting as an instructor. It was not good for him to leave. More importantly, no one was more suitable than Ding Shan to complete the task of selling horses. The reason was that no one was more cunning than Ding Shan. Ding Shan was the cavalry company commander of the regiment. Many times he was responsible for investigating the enemy. Sometimes, in order to investigate the enemy more clearly, he needed to go to the enemy's territory. At this time, disguises were very important. He didn't know how many times he had appeared in the enemy's territory as a merchant and completed the mission very well. Therefore, this mission belonged to none other than him. "Okay." Ding Shan didn't refuse and then added, "I've long heard that the Vice-1,000 households of the Double City Guard, Zhang Mingji, is very greedy. I want to start with him." "No problem at all. You don't need to report what to do. The 6th young master only wants results. I hope you can have a better performance this time," Zhui Feng said with a serious face. Yes, I promise to complete the mission. Ding Shan stood at attention and gave a standard military salute. He turned and left the tent. Ding Shan went to carry out the mission. The training in the camp didn't stop. They had already trained for 9 days. Everyone's progress was very fast. Tomorrow was the day of the test and also the time to decide their status. Many people were nervous and excited. In this atmosphere, Ding Shan returned to the camp and brought back a piece of good news that made Xue Feng happy. Not long after, he took Ding Shan to the temporary command tent where Yang Qindong was resting. In the command tent, Yang Qindong saw Xue Feng and Ding Shan. He seriously listened to the reports of the two and had a preliminary understanding of the battle plan. Ding Shan was a young man who wasn't very tall and always had a smile on his face. Perhaps it was because of the slight evil in his smile that he was able to disguise himself as a merchant so smoothly and vividly. According to Ding Shan, after he took the mission, he went to the double city guard and then spent some silver to easily meet the vice 1,000 households here. Zhang Mingji had relied on his ancestors to obtain the position of vice head of the 1,000 prefectures. Just like his name, he was very wise and knew what was best for him. The reason he found Zhang Mingji was because he was a smart person. Ding Shan liked to deal with smart people. This could save him a lot of time and energy. Zhang Mingji saw Ding Shan in a tea house in the city. His hands were behind his back, and his face was hidden. Ding Shan didn't know how many of these great Ming generals he had seen. They always had a high and mighty appearance, as though they looked down on the people of the world. However, they didn't have much in their stomach. General Zhang, although he looked down on him, Ding Shan's attitude was very low on the surface. Weren't merchants like this? They only had benefits in their eyes. In order to achieve their goals, they were even willing to act like a grandson. Chapter 637. N. He snorted with his nostrils facing the sky as a greeting. After he was completely seated, he caressed the teacup and spoke with an indifferent expression. Your surname Ding? I heard from Xiao Wuzi that you want to see me and you want to do business with me? The so-called Xiao Wuzi was the middleman Ding Shan had found. He was a broker in the city and was equivalent to the current middleman and introducer. Don't underestimate these brokers. Although their status wasn't very high, they had a wide range of connections. They knew many people from all walks of life. Many things that were impossible in the eyes of others could often be turned upside down once they made contact with one of them. Yes, this one's surname is Ding. I'm the 5th brother I found. Ding Shan's face was full of flattery. It was very in line with the face of a businessman who smiled when he saw people. And that's enough. Your surname isn't important. After this matter, I will forget about it. Just tell me what business you want to do with me this time. Let me tell you, this general is very busy. If it's a small business, then don't waste each other's time here. He acted as if he was very busy with work and had a lot of things to do. He didn't even look Ding Shan in the eye. Ding Shan didn't care about Zhang Mingji's disdain at all. He also didn't plan on forming any friendship with this person. Everyone met for their own purposes. Yes, since General Zhang says so, then this one will make a long story short. I have a batch of war horses on hand, and I'm anxious to sell them. I don't know if General Zhang has any thoughts. As if out of instinct, Zhang Mingji waited for the other to finish speaking before he hurriedly lowered the price. I thought it was some big business. So it's war horses. Let me tell you. Wait, what did you just say? War horses? When he suddenly understood that Ding Shan's business was war horses, his expression changed greatly. He no longer had the careless appearance from before. Yes, war horses. This time, it was Ding Shan's turn to become serious. Zhang Mingji carefully sized up Ding Shan. He didn't seem to believe the other's words. He asked again, as if to confirm, "What's your surname?" "Oh, you're Boss Ding, right? Are you sure you want to trade war horses with me? Not ordinary horses?" It wasn't strange that Zhang Mingji would ask this. The law of the great Ming dynasty stipulated that war horses were not allowed to be bought and sold privately. However, it was different for ordinary horses. As long as the quantity was not too large, private transactions were not prohibited. Of course, the price of war horses was several times higher than that of ordinary horses. I'm 100% sure that they are war horses. Oh, that's right. General Zhang, please look outside. Do you see my strong horse tied to the pole? That's the one I rode, and this is one of them. Pointing at the healthy horse outside the tea house, Ding Shan said with a flaunting look, although his current position was inherited from his ancestors, Zhang Mingji wasn't a complete good-for-nothing. At least, he still had a certain understanding of horses. This was because he had done a lot of horse trading in the past, but it was his first time dealing with war horses. Firstly, the trading of war horses was illegal, and no one dared to look for these officials. Secondly, who would sell a war horse when they had one? Those with power would be afraid of having too few people. Under suspicion, Zhang Mingji looked at the horse outside the tea house. With his eyesight, he could see that the quality of the horse was good. It was muscular and full of strength. This horse is good, but how many are there? He quickly suppressed the shock in his heart. In Zhang Mingji's view, although the quality of these war horses was good, they weren't rare goods. It was normal to have 3 to 5 of them. Ding Shan had been observing the changes in Zhang Mingji's expression. He was already certain in his heart. Seeing the other party ask about the number, he stretched out 4 fingers. Only 4. Zhang Mingji breathed a sigh of relief. For war horses, wasn't that surprising? If he wanted, he could take the risk and get 4 from the army in the city. No. Ding Shan shook his head and waved his extended fingers. No. Then it's 40? At this moment, Zhang Mingji's interest was piqued. For him, if it was really 40, then it attracted his interest. No. General Zhang, can't you think about the bigger picture? Ding Shan looked as if he was trying his best to guess, and not afraid of being scared. Sitting across from him, Zhang Mingji was really frightened at this moment. Since Ding Shan dared to say so, then it definitely wasn't 40. Could it be 400? Hiss. At this moment, Zhang Mingji couldn't stay calm. It wasn't that he hadn't seen 400 war horses before. Didn't the nearby Jianzhou left guard have 2,000 war horses? But that belonged to the Beiming imperial court, and these 400 were private transactions. If the matter was done, it would belong to him, and he could sell it to the army at a high price. He could even think of a way to snatch these war horses and give them to the Jianzhou left guard. It would definitely be a great merit. At that time, he might be promoted and become a true Qianhu. Don't underestimate the difference between a Qianhu and a Qianhu. There was a huge difference in power between the two. It was so big that some people couldn't achieve it in their lifetime. Zhang Mingji relied on his inheritance to become a Qianhu. It seemed that his starting point was very high, but if nothing unexpected happened, he might stop there for the rest of his life. When it came to his next generation, he wouldn't be a Qianhu, but a Qianhu for his descendants. He was under a lot of pressure. At this moment, his thoughts turned many times. In the end, he made up his mind. This matter had to be done, and it had to be done well. As for the present, he would first stabilize Ding Shan's mind, and then make a plan later. Cough. 400 war horses, right? Zhang Mingji's voice trembled slightly, indicating the excitement in his heart at the moment. Yes, it is 400, but I don't know if General Zhang can eat them all. If he can, how much silver can I give for each one? Of course, the quality is guaranteed. Each one won't be worse than the one outside. Pointing outside the tea house, Ding Shan still had a smile on his face. Yes, if there are no problems with the quality, it's only 400 war horses. I'll take them. At this moment, Zhang Mingji had to put on a rich and overbearing appearance. He couldn't show his cowardice and let Ding Shan doubt him. If that was the case, then this business deal wouldn't be able to be done. He also didn't ask where the war horses came from. This was the rule. The buyer didn't ask the seller where the goods came from. Because of this, there were many good and cheap goods circulating in the market. Okay. Ding Shan also had a very happy expression. Then he looked at Zhang Mingji with a longing gaze, as if waiting for him to make a bid. Zhang Mingji only thought for a moment before nodding. Okay, if there are no problems with the quality, I can give you 200 silver for each war horse. How about it? In the normal market, an ordinary war horse only cost around 30 silver. A war horse's price was around 100 to 120 silver. The specific price depended on the war horse's health and leg strength. But with so many war horses, of course, it couldn't be treated like normal. Often, the more war horses there were, the more expensive they were. But the price of 200 silver per war horse was very sincere. It was even higher than the market price and the black market price. 200 silver per war horse. 400 war horses would be 80,000 silver. This was definitely not a small number, and it was definitely not something a small vice 1,000 households could decide. But Zhang Mingji didn't think too much before making a decision. This could only prove one thing, which was that he was determined to get it. But Ding Shan didn't seem to see this. He just kept smiling and nodding, looking very much like a greedy merchant. The price was settled. Next was the location of the transaction. 3 days later, at Horn Mountain, the two sides agreed to trade there, one hand for the goods. Only then did Ding Shan leave. Zhang Mingji looked at the departing figure and fell into deep thought. Since such a big piece of fat meat was in front of him, he had to eat it. The problem now was how to eat it. For 100 war horses, not to mention him, even with the current strength of the Twin City Guards, it would be difficult to eat. It seemed that he had to inform the Jianzhou left guard. This was also the reason why he insisted on the transaction 3 days later. On the surface, he said to Ding Shan that he wanted to gather silver. After all, 80,000 silver was not a small amount. But in reality, he wanted to give enough time to inform the left guard. Although the war horses could communicate with each other, it would take 2 days to go and return. In addition, they needed to make preparations. 3 days was just right. As a company commander directly under the regiment, Ding Shan's brain was definitely enough. He had seen through Zhang Mingji's bad intentions, but he wasn't afraid. If it was in the past, with only their cavalry regiment, it would be troublesome to take the initiative to provoke such an enemy. But now, with the 6th Young Master and the 3rd Regiment of the Cold Front and 6 auxiliary battalions, what was there to fear? In the temporary command tent, Ding Shan gave a detailed account of his meeting with Zhang Mingji. In the end, he also mentioned his suspicions. Then he tightly shut his mouth. In this tent, no one, from the 6th Young Master to the 3 regimental commanders and the battalion commanders, had the right to speak as a company commander. Very good. This time, Company Commander Ding has done a meritorious service. Yang Chendong waited for Ding Shan to finish explaining the situation, then praised him generously. Then his gaze began to search the sand table. Soon, he found the place called Horn Mountain. The new, Gon City Sea was now outside the pass, in the area of the 3 northeastern provinces. Before it was heavily developed, there were only plains and high mountains here. The tall mountains were connected one after another, giving people a very grand and spectacular feeling. The plains stretched as far as the eye could see, and one could not see the end of it, but one could also see very far away. But there were some special environments in this kind of terrain. For example, Horn Mountain Col was the connecting point between the high mountains and the plains. It belonged to the area below the mountains. Chapter 638. With the mountain behind them, they could block the cold winds of the northeast winter. This kind of place was suitable for the local people to live in. Slowly, it formed a village of 100 families. The surrounding fields had also been properly developed. And this kind of place had a special characteristic. It was very suitable for an ambush. On one side of Horn Mountain Col was a tall mountain and dense forest. Imagine, if there was an ambush there, what kind of effect would it have? If they charged down from above, they would gain the upper hand. There was also a village at the foot of the mountain. They only needed to block the entrance to the kernel. Then wouldn't the people who came here be caught? Since Zhang Mingji had chosen this place for the transaction, he must have a plan. Perhaps he had already arranged spies in this Horn Mountain Col village. In other words, the other side had the upper hand. If Ding Shan dared to play any tricks, he would not be able to escape his eyes. How many enemies does the Twin City Guard have? How many troops will they send? After some consideration, Yang Qindong asked Wind Chaser, the leader of the cavalry regiment, who was standing at the side. Zhui Feng thought carefully and quickly gave a general answer. Replying to 6th Young Master, the Twin City Guard only has a single 1,000 households stationed there. There are only 1,000 or so people stationed there. Since they want to swallow this war horse, they can't let anyone know about it. They won't send too many people either. I estimate that other than the original 300 cavalrymen, they will at most send another 200 infantrymen, half of the total force. This was not Zhui Feng's guess, but the result of countless experiences. Often, there would be other races causing trouble in this area. The nearby Baiming cities would often send half of their troops. After all, there were large amounts of people and things that belonged to them in the city. They could not just throw away the watermelon and pick up the sesame. They were also afraid of being lured away by the enemy and not even having a home to call home. Half of their forces? Hee easy. Yang Qindong naturally showed a confident smile after hearing this. A plan was slowly taking shape in his mind. About a quarter of an hour later, he looked at the sand table again and began to arrange the combat tasks. Battalion Commander Gao Danhua, you, Company Commander Ding Shan, and Company Commander Su Yunsheng will be in charge of dealing with the Baiming army in Horn Hill Kernel. Remember, killing the enemy is a must, and taking their war horses is your main goal. Of course, you cannot let a single person go and leak the news. Battalion Commander Ding, you, Battalion Commander Ma Xiangshan, your 2 cavalry battalions will be in charge of dealing with the enemies of the Maolian guards who may come to help. If there are no accidents, they will definitely send 300 cavalrymen, so you must keep their war horses. The rest of the people will be with this young master to ambush the main force of the Jianzhou left guard in the Stone Mountain area. Everyone should familiarize yourself with your mission and the terrain as soon as possible. If there is anything you don't understand, you can ask this young master at any time. With the advantage of superior forces, excellent equipment, and the surprise of the attack, Yang Qindong was 100% sure that he could deal a heavy blow to the Baiming cavalry. The key question now was how many war horses they could keep. With his orders, the regiments, battalions, and companies quickly began to mobilize and divide the work before the battle. Only one day later, except for a company of auxiliary soldiers left to guard the supplies. The rest of the soldiers all moved out and went to their own targets. At the same time, a warhorse in charge of communication also entered the Jianzhou Left Guard's office. The commander of the Jianzhou Left Guard was called Chen Dula. He was a brave general, and the only high-ranking general in the Jianzhou Left Guard's office that did not rely on inheritance. He had the official position of Baiming third-grade general. After Zhang Mingji and Ding Shan separated, they went to the barracks to find Qianhu Ying. After a discussion, they both felt that with their own strength, it was impossible for them to take down 400 warhorses. They decided to report it to their superiors and ask the Jianzhou Left Guard and the neighboring city's Maolian Guard to send troops to help. As a reward, the Shuangqing Guard would get 150 warhorses, the Maolian Guard would get 50, and the Jianzhou Left Guard would get 200. There was no other way. The Jianzhou Left Guard was a Jianzhou Left Guard, and its strength was too great. If they were asked to help, they had to give enough benefits, even though they were family. But brothers still had to settle accounts, clearly, right? As for the Maolian Guard, they only needed to send troops to help, and they would get 50 warhorses for free. No matter how one looked at it, it was a profit. In the Jianzhou Left Guard, Commander Chendula, who received the news, called over his fellow commanders Liang Xian, secondary grade 3, and Commander Tang Longtian, primary grade 4, to discuss how to cooperate with the Shuangqing Guard to take down these 400 warhorses. This is a piece of fat meat. Hee. Tang Longtian, who received the news, rubbed his calloused hands and laughed. This Shuangqing Guard is quite tactful, giving us half of the benefits. Since that's the case, I'll take action once. Later, I'll take 2,000 cavalry with me. Then everything will be easy. Commander Liang Xian spoke with an insufferably arrogant expression on his face. Liang Xian had inherited the position of Commander Liang Xian through the virtue of his ancestors. In reality, the Liang family was considered a wealthy and powerful family in Baiming, so ordinary people naturally wouldn't enter his eyes. This gave him a natural arrogance. Even in the entire Jianzhou Left Guard, there was no one else who could enter his eyes other than Commander Chen Dula. Under his arrogance and the powerful Liang family background, no one could stop him from doing whatever he wanted. Even if it was Chen Dula, who was half a rank higher, but because of the Tang family's background, as long as Liang Xian didn't go overboard, he would turn a blind eye. To be able to get 200 war horses in one action was definitely not a small merit. Needless to say, Liang Xian wanted this merit and wanted to take action. What else could Chendula say? He also didn't think that there was any power nearby that could stop his 2,000 cavalry. Oh, there was a unit under the banner of the 5-star army that could be considered to have some power. They had more than 1,000 people, but the two sides had never directly dealt with each other. The other side also seemed to be very friendly towards Baiming, so there was no need to consider their threat. Besides, how could 1,000 cavalry be a match for his 2,000 elite cavalry? Since there was no danger, he would just let Liang Xian do what he wanted. Since Chen Dola didn't care anymore, Liang Xian naturally became the one who made the decision. He called over Puji, a minor 5th rank official, and had him gather 2,000 cavalrymen. The next morning, they would follow him to carry out the military mission. The matter was settled like this. From the beginning to the end, no one asked about the origin of the 400 war horses. It had to be said that they were indeed very careless. Perhaps it was because the Baiming army had been ruling here for many years, and they were used to the feeling of having everything under control. The cavalry of the Jianzhou Left Guard decided to set off on the morning of the 3rd day because the time of the transaction was set at noon. As long as they were fast enough, they would naturally be able to make it. However, Yang Qindong set the time of departure on the morning of the day before, which gave them an extra day to prepare. Based on this point, the Ming army had no reason to be undefeated. Many people said that opportunities were prepared for those who were prepared. Not only were you weak, but you also didn't have enough preparation and time to prepare. How could you say that you were undefeated? Horn Mountain Call, on the morning of the third day, suddenly became lively. The small area, which originally only had 100 households, suddenly had 300 Ming cavalry, and the atmosphere became somewhat tense. The 300 cavalry were personally led by Vice Qianhu Zhang Mingji. He had no intention of hiding it. After all, the transaction this time was 400 war horses. If they didn't bring enough people, how could they bring these war horses back? He believed that even Ding Shan wouldn't be able to say anything after seeing this formation. Of course, on the surface, there were only 300 cavalry, but in the dark, on the back mountain of Horn Mountain Call, there were 200 infantry lying in ambush. If it weren't for the safety of the Twin City Guards, perhaps even Qianhu, He Ying would personally make a trip. 300 cavalrymen and 200 infantrymen in the dark. This made Zhang Mingji very confident. In addition, the 300 cavalrymen of the Maolian Guard and 2,000 cavalrymen of the Jian province left guard would appear one after another after receiving the news. This made him very confident. He believed that everything was under his control. Now, he only had to wait for the seller Ding Shan to appear. The agreed time was noon. When smoke began to slowly rise from the chimneys of the families in the small village of Horn Mountain Call, a large group of horses arrived at the village gate. The group was made up of 400 war horses, and each war horse had a rider. Not only that, but there were also more than 100 people following from the left and right. It seemed like the group was quite large. "They're here." Zhang Mingji immediately noticed the caravan, and a smirk appeared on his face, as if he had succeeded in his scheme. This Ding Shan really didn't go back on his word. He really did bring a group of 400 war horses. This person really was stupid, daring to trust him so much. At this moment, Zhang Mingji already viewed Ding Shan and this group of horses as a piece of fat meat that had jumped into a bowl. Although there were 400 cavalry and 100 men that appeared with the group of horses, he had already automatically ignored them. What kind of place was this? This was Ming's slave Gandu Si, who dared to make an enemy of the Ming army here. Under the preconceived notions of an official, he didn't think that there would be people who dared to make an enemy out of them, or that they would be unfavorable to him. He didn't put any of the dangers in his eyes. All he saw were benefits and opportunities. Just as Company Commander Ding Shan and 2nd Battalion Commander Gao Danhua led 500 cavalry and 400 war horses into the village, in the back mountains of Horn Mountain Call, a smokeless massacre was taking place. The ones being massacred were the 200 Ming infantry sent from Shuangqing. The killers were the Reconnaissance Battalion Commander Su Yunsheng and his subordinates, 100 soldiers. With 100 elite Reconnaissance Battalion soldiers against 200 Ming infantry, whose combat strength was only around 3rd class, and also a sneak attack, there was no problem in winning. In silence, Ming soldiers hiding in the forest were killed one after another. Many of the soldiers didn't even make a sound before they died. They didn't even know who killed them or what the killer looked like. Chapter 639. One of the main training for scouts was to take care of their enemies both in the open and in the dark. Facing these Ming soldiers who were completely defenseless and in a scattered formation, it was too easy for them to complete their mission. They killed one person with a single slash. Any Ming soldier who had their mouth and nose covered by them from behind would have blood spurt out from their necks. Then they would fall into eternal darkness and die. The entire process was very smooth, although the Ming soldiers still discovered something in the end. When there were less than 20 of them left, it was already too late for them to counterattack. When the scouts pounced on them one by one like fierce tigers, everything was over. From beginning to end, the 200 Ming soldiers did not make any loud noise and did not alarm Zhang Mingji and the 300 cavalry at the foot of the mountain. In fact, even if they made a noise now, it was not important for the overall situation. Ding Shan and Gao Danhua, who had entered the village, had already received the signal from the mountain and launched a cavalry attack. Battalion commander Gao Danhua led her 400 cavalrymen and charged forward at high speed. Company commander Ding Shan led his 100 soldiers to guard the entrance of the village. Each of them held a long machete in their hands, looking like they were guarding the pass, preventing any enemy from escaping from here. The reason they chose Horn Mountain Call was because it was easy to enter and difficult to leave. It was to prevent Ding Shan and the others from suddenly escaping when they saw that the situation was not good. But now they had to jump into the hole that they had dug for the other side. Get on your horses, quickly get on your horses, and prepare to meet the enemy. Vice Chenhu Zhang Mingji saw the sudden attack of the cavalry, causing the ground to tremble. At this moment, he was really scared. He panicked and shouted at the 300 cavalry. The 300 cavalry from the Twin Cities did not expect such a thing to happen. They came here to receive their war horses. Even if they wanted to fight, they had to wait for the cavalry from the Jian province left guard and the Maolian guard to appear together. What was the situation now? The reinforcements had not yet appeared, and they were about to start fighting? The cavalry from the Twin Cities were completely unprepared. Under Zhang Mingji's yelling, they all hurriedly got on their horses. Just as they were done, Gao Danhua's 400 cavalrymen were already within 100 meters of them. This was already within the effective range of the archers on horseback. Waves of arrows fell like raindrops, smashing into their bodies. Thump, 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 thump. Before they were ready, dozens of northern Ming cavalrymen were shot in their vitals by arrows and fell from their horses. Some of the cavalrymen were quite lucky. Although they were shot in their vitals, they were not shot in their vitals and were still able to fight. Zhang Mingji was one of the luckiest. He knew that the situation wasn't good since he hadn't been hit by the arrows. He shouted again, "Counterattack with arrows. Prepare to counterattack with arrows." The outcome of this cavalry clash was predestined from the very beginning. Against the unprepared, they were prepared for battle but unprepared. Allowing Zhang Mingji to yell and order them around was just a futile attempt to resist. It was only a distance of 100 meters. For the elite cavalry, it was just a blink of an eye. The poor Ming cavalrymen were still taking out their bows and arrows from their quivers. Their opponents rushed over so quickly that they didn't have time to draw their sabers. Many of them were cut down by the cavalry under the protection of more than a dozen soldiers. Zhang Mingji was lucky enough to rush out of the battlefield and rushed straight to the entrance of the village. His goal was very simple. He wanted to escape from here and then meet up with the reinforcements from the Jian province left guard and the Maolian guard. Then he would go back and slaughter Ding Shan and the others. Daring to have ideas about them, they were really courting death. Zhang Mingji had indeed forgotten that he also had ideas about the other party. He had even been prepared to steal horses and kill people because he would never allow the news of him stealing goods and killing people to spread. But now his opponent was giving him a taste of his own medicine. Coming, kill. Seeing Zhang Mingji leading more than a dozen cavalrymen to the entrance of the village, Ding Shan, who was guarding here, had a trace of excitement on his face. Then he waved his large saber and directly went up to meet them. This 2-meter-long saber was also called a saber. It was one of the most common weapons used by infantrymen to deal with cavalrymen. With its length, as long as the timing was right, it could often chop off the front hooves of a high-speed warhorse and flip the enemy to the ground. Although warhorses were very precious, in times of danger, a person's life was even more important. It was only a dozen warhorses, so it was fine to chop them up. They couldn't let them escape. The sixth young master had given a strict order that none of the enemies who had seen them were allowed to escape. Swish, swish. As the warhorses fell to the ground one by one, the Ming cavalrymen also fell from their horses. Before they could do anything like turn over, a saber that flashed with a cold light had already landed on their bodies, chopping their bodies into pieces. They couldn't be more dead. Zhang Mingji's luck finally ran out. With his warhorse's front hooves cut off, he also fell from his horse. Then, what greeted him was 3 sharp sabers falling down. He didn't even have the time to ask who his opponent was. Why did they have the guts to go against the Ming army? His head was separated from his body. At this moment, he couldn't be more dead. 300 cavalrymen. They were either shot to death by arrows, fell in the path of the cavalrymen's charge, or died in the path of escape. In the end, not a single one was left. Gao Danhua and Ding Shan also didn't have any intention of keeping anyone alive. Whenever they discovered that a Ming soldier was not completely dead, they would go up and stab him. Their movements were fast and precise. It was obvious that this was not the first time they had done this. Fortunately, Zhang Mingji had already given the order that all the civilians in Hornhill Call could only stay in their homes. No one was allowed to go out. Otherwise, they would be killed without mercy. Originally, he didn't want people to see him kill people and steal horses. Now, it helped Ding Shan, Gao Danhua, and the others. They didn't need to raise their sabers and do anything to the innocent civilians. Quickly clean up the battlefield and leave this place. Gao Danhua gave the order. Ding Shan and the cavalrymen began to carry it out. After less than an hour, Hornhill Call had once again returned to its original tranquility. Only the smell of blood still filled the air and didn't dissipate for a long time. Outside Hornhill Call, it was not peaceful at this time. The 300 Mao Lian Guard cavalrymen that had come from Mao Lian City were facing the combined attack of the 1st Battalion of the Cavalry Division, Deng Yu, and the 3rd Battalion, Ma Xiangshan. The Mao Lian Guard cavalrymen also suddenly met the enemy without any preparation. First, there was a wave of archers attacking from afar. Then, there was a close-range charge, 800 against 300. Adding on that the cavalry division's sabers were so sharp, there were occasionally some Ming cavalrymen who wanted to put up a fight. But after a few swings on the horses, they sadly found that the sabers in their hands had broken from the middle due to the quality of the sabers. Facing the Mao Lian Guard cavalrymen with broken sabers, no matter if it was Deng Yu or Ma Xiangshan, no one would be polite. Who could say that the quality of a weapon was not another manifestation of a powerful hairstyle, taking advantage of your weakness to take your life? After a flurry of sabers, the 300 Mao Lian Guard soldiers were completely annihilated. The cavalry division only lost 1 person and more than 10 people to take down 300 warhorses. Time went back 4 hours. In the 3 battles, the first to act was the main force of the mercenaries led by Yang Qindong. Their opponent was the left guard cavalry of Jian province. This time, there were 2,000 of them. From afar, they looked like a long dragon. Once they appeared, they would cause waves of tremors, giving people the feeling that they were a mighty army with thousands of men and horses. Because they were the furthest from Hornhill Call, the Jian province left guard cavalrymen were the first to set off. When the sky had just brightened, they set off from the city. By the time they reached the Stone Mountain area, it was already around 9 in the morning. In comparison, Yang Qindong's troops came even earlier. They had already arrived yesterday and chose the best battlefield. Relying on the fact that the Stone Mountain area was mostly stone, they chose a path between two mountains as the ambush location. Although it was called a mountain, it was not as tall as a real mountain. It was only about 20 meters high and was completely bare, showing the nature of a stone mountain. However, the height of 20 meters was enough to make Yang Qindong very satisfied. First, he arranged for the soldiers to place piles of stones at the exit between the two mountains to block it. This was to ensure that the enemy could only be a turtle in a jar after entering here. Then, he began to arrange the specific location and tasks for the ambush for each battalion. The political commissar of the 2nd Regiment and the commander of the 2nd Battalion, Chun Bo, was responsible for the attack on the left side of the mountain. The commander of the 3rd Battalion, Chun Yang, was responsible for the attack on the right side of the mountain. The regimental commander and the commander of the 1st Battalion, Wu Sheng, was responsible for blocking the enemy's retreat. At the same time, each battalion brought 2 auxiliary battalions to ensure that the task could be completed smoothly. In this battle, besides Yang Qindong himself riding the white dragon horse, there was no other horse accompanying him. However, when facing an enemy of 2,000 cavalrymen, he was still full of confidence. This was an ambush. His troops were nearly twice the number of the enemy, and they were equipped with advanced flintlocks. There was no possibility of failure. Now, he just had to wait for the enemy to appear on time. Liang Xian, the commander of the Jian Province Left Guard, also had the same idea as Yang Qindong. Personally leading 2,000 cavalrymen, this force was equivalent to walking sideways in the vicinity. It was fortunate that they did not cause trouble for others. Who would dare to have any ideas about him? Moreover, with the combat power and speed of 2,000 cavalrymen, even if they encountered the enemy, they could completely rampage. There was no need to consider or worry about anything. Chapter 640. With such arrogant thoughts, the 2,000 cavalrymen charged forward. Even though they knew that there was a section between two mountains, no one had the intention to change their path. After all, if all the cavalrymen charged forward, they would be able to pass through this section in 3 minutes. In the past, they didn't know how many times they had passed through this area, but they had never encountered any danger. There wasn't any danger in the past, and there shouldn't be any now. With such thoughts, the 2,000 Ming cavalrymen charged forward with Wei Zhen and Hu Ji as the vanguard. In less than 2 minutes, the 2,000 cavalrymen had entered the ambush area. At this moment, General Hu Ji, who was charging at the front, had already seen the mountain rocks that were 4 meters tall blocking the road. Whoa! Hu Ji, who had stopped his horse, instinctively raised his head and looked around. Logically speaking, since there were rocks blocking the road, there must be an ambush nearby. However, no matter how he looked around, he couldn't see a single enemy. He also didn't expect the enemy to suddenly appear and wave their flags and battle cries. "General, what should we do?" Seeing that their path was blocked, the vanguard cavalry had no choice but to rein in their horses and put all their attention on Hu Ji. "The situation isn't right, retreat." Hu Ji decisively gave the order to retreat. Although he could order the army to dismount and move the rocks in front of him away, he still felt uneasy. After all, the rocks were only 4 meters tall, and they should be able to remove the obstacles in front of them quickly. The soldiers naturally followed the general's lead. Since Hu Ji gave the order, the cavalrymen below nodded and prepared to retreat. At this moment, they realized that the cavalrymen behind them had caught up. Everyone was blocked in between the two mountains. "Don't move forward. Everyone listen to my order. turn your horses around and retreat." Seeing that more and more people were coming, the bad feeling in Hu Ji's heart grew stronger. He was anxious to get out of here. At the same time, he looked around from time to time. Although there wasn't a single enemy in sight, he felt that there were countless pairs of eyes watching him. On the left side of the mountain, Yang Qindong was watching everything that was happening at the foot of the mountain with Squad 1 and 2. With a leaf in his mouth, Yang Qindong put down the nightmare domain in his hand and sighed. "The enemy's vanguard general is quite smart. Too bad. I can't have it all." After sighing, Yang Qindong shook his head and threw the thought to the back of his mind. In the entire great Ming dynasty, there were naturally many capable people. Moreover, there were also countless people who were good at fighting. He couldn't possibly pull everyone into his camp just because he saw them. Besides, he already had a lot of elites in his hands. Just like the Ghost Sniper Team and the Wolf Fang Special Forces, everyone was 1 in 100, 1 in 1,000, or even 1 in 10,000 experts. "Bai Zhuo, I have a mission for you. Kill the enemy's vanguard general for me." Yang Qindong looked to the right. A member of the Phantom Sniper Squad was lying on the ground. Captain Bai Zhuo was also among them. He was holding a high-efficiency sniper rifle and preparing to shoot. Although there weren't many people in the northern part of the Great Ming Dynasty, they were all elites. For example, the Phantom Sniper Squad and the Wolf Fang Squad were brought along. As a member of the Special Forces in his previous life, he knew that real sharpshooters were made from bullets, and real elites were made from thousands of dangers. If you wanted an elite army, you shouldn't be afraid of losses. Only the mediocre would fade into the background, and the real elites would stand out. This time, he brought these two teams here to continue polishing them and training them. Often, actual combat was the best training ground. Don't worry, sixth young master. Bai Zhuo knew that this was an opportunity for him to show off, so he immediately agreed. Then, he began to adjust the muzzle and the sight, taking advantage of this time. The third commander, Wu Sheng, led a battalion to completely cut off the retreat of the Baiming cavalry and built a simple line of defense there. This was also the reason why Yang Qindong didn't immediately give the order to attack. He didn't completely block the enemy here. If he launched a sudden attack, the enemy might escape. Since they were already here, Yang Qindong had already reserved these 2,000 war horses in his heart. If any of them escaped, it would be a flaw, and he wouldn't allow it to happen. Bai Zhuo first measured the current wind speed, then he adjusted his breathing. At this time, he was completely immersed in the wind. In his eyes, there was only one thing, and that was the target that was about to be killed. The stone mountain was no more than 20 meters high, and the muzzle of the gun was placed between two rocks. It was well hidden, and the distance between the two mountains was no more than 200 meters. For a sniper rifle that could shoot at a distance of 1,500 meters, or even further, this was not a problem at all. Everything was ready. Bai Zhuo's right index finger was already placed on the hook of the rifle. Then he moved it bit by bit. Bang! The gunshot was fired. From the time Yang Qindong gave the order to Bai Zhuo locking onto the target, it only took 6 to 7 seconds. In terms of speed, Bai Zhuo was already an excellent sniper. Of course, if he could be faster, he would be an ace sniper. The gunshot sounded, followed by the sound of a head exploding in the middle of the two mountains. Hu Ji was dead. Without any warning, without seeing who the enemy was, without even knowing where the bullet came from, he died in a daze. Perhaps at the moment of his death, he was certain that there was indeed danger here. Bai Zhuo's shot was like a signal flare. The mercenaries who had been lying in ambush on both sides also locked onto the target and began to fire continuously. After Hu Ji's death, one by one, the Baiming cavalrymen fell off their horses and died on the ground. Enemy attack. Enemy A centurion was still shouting loudly, but he quickly stopped halfway. There was no other reason other than that the bullet had already entered his body. He was already a dead man. How could a dead man speak? One by one, the northern Ming cavalry were hit by the bullets. They didn't even see what the enemy looked like before they fell off their horses or died on their horses. And this kind of scene seemed to be contagious. It started from the vanguard and spread all the way to the middle and rear of the army. Liang Xian, who was in the middle of the army, heard the loud gunshots. His face turned from red to white. Even if he was a fool, he would know that he had fallen into an ambush at this moment. But why were the gunshots so dense? Where did they come from? When did such a powerful enemy and opponent appear in this area? Some thoughts flashed through his mind. At this time, Liang Xian was thinking more about how to escape this place. He originally thought that this time he would be able to obtain a great merit by just walking around. Who knew that his life would be in danger? Retreat, retreat, retreat. Seeing the soldiers in front and beside him being targeted and shot without any resistance, Liang Xian's heart was in a mess. Liang Xian's courage was about to break at this moment. He shouted loudly, and under the protection of several bodyguards, he turned around and reined in his horse, preparing to flee. But no matter how fast he was, how could he be faster than a bullet? Soon, his figure was locked on by the ghost shadow snipers mixed in with the mercenaries. Perhaps no one could recognize his identity, but under the tight protection of several bodyguards, even if one used their toes to think, they would know that this person's identity was not ordinary. Since Liang Xian was a person of status, he would definitely be the target of special attention. At least 3 or more ghost shadow snipers targeted Liang Xian. It was a pity for this secondary grade 3 commander. He originally thought that he could rely on the Liang family's background to make a name for himself in the new Urgon capital. Once he had the chance, he would return to Ming to be a high official. But now he was about to lose his life because of a mission that was not dangerous at all. At the same time, he was targeted by at least 3 qualified snipers. Even a god would not be able to save him now. Bang, bang, bang. Gunshots continued to be heard in the sky above the battlefield, but it was not as dense as before. Before the battle, the 6th young master had given a strict order. If one was not confident enough, they were not to shoot casually, and they were not to shoot any war horses. This made some soldiers who were not confident in their marksmanship take the initiative to put down their guns. They could only watch and see how others were performing. Under another round of gunshots, the bodyguards protecting Liang Xian fell from their horses one by one, revealing the general's figure. Bang, bang! 2 sniper shots rang out at the same time, hitting Liang Xian's head and heart respectively. This arrogant commander who couldn't be underestimated widened his eyes and fell off the horse with an unwilling expression. Even in death, he did not know who killed him. He had the same unwillingly thought as Vice Qianhuzhang Mingji. The vanguard, middle, and rear troops all fell from their horses and died under the waves of gunshots. Only a small portion of the rear troops reacted quickly and turned around to escape the 2 mountains. What awaited them was not a ray of hope, but a heavy defensive line set up by Wu Sheng's main battalion and 2 auxiliary battalions. Hit them hard. Finally seeing the enemy appear in his line of sight, Wu Sheng, who had been waiting for a long time, gave the order. Hundreds of gunshots sounded at the same time, and the bodies of the Ming cavalry that appeared in front of them were filled with holes. Their bodies were like a hornet's nest, and then they fell off their horses one by one and died. All that was left was the constant neighing of the war horses, as if they were calling for their masters to get up, and get up quickly. Chapter 641. A total of 2,000 northern Ming cavalrymen were surrounded by 4,000 elite mercenaries. From the beginning to the end of the battle, all of them were killed in less than 2 hours. Only a few dozen cavalrymen were seriously injured and fell to the ground. When the mercenaries cleaned up the battlefield, they were killed without a doubt. Sixth young master, out of the 2,000 horses, only 24 were grazed by bullets. The rest are unharmed. Our army has no casualties. Wu Sheng trotted to Yang Qindong, who had already gone down the stone mountain, and made a salute to report the results. "AI, didn't you say not to hurt the horses?" Hearing this result, Yang Qindong shook his head in dissatisfaction. However, he knew that since it was a battlefield, nothing could be perfect. "Okay, tell all the brothers to record the contributions and reward them according to their contributions. Now, take all the war horses away and bury all the enemy corpses in the pit we have prepared long ago." The Battle of Stone Mountain was a victory. With careful planning, excellent weapons, and strong military quality, they caught the enemy off guard. They killed 2,018 enemies and captured 2,018 horses. With this victory, the mercenaries withdrew from the mountain and headed straight for Sea Town. It was time to leave. Although there was a lot of military resources, with so many horses, it wouldn't be too hard to carry the equipment. Yang Qindong, who was the first to act and the first to return, returned to Sea Town. After putting all the resources on the horses, he left Sea Town and went through the defense line between Twin Cities and Malian City. He headed straight for his new destination, Narcissus Town, which was one of the main habitats of the Swanee tribe. During the 5 dynasties, the Khitan people called the Black Water Swanee the Jurchens. From then on, the name Jurchens replaced the Swanee. In the Liao dynasty, they changed the name to Straight Women. Whether it was Jurchens or Straight Women, the Swanee tribe was the predecessor of the Jurchens. Yang Qindong chose this location not only because he heard from Zhu Feng that there were a lot of war horses here, but also because he remembered that the last feudal dynasty of the Great Ming dynasty was destroyed by them. He came here in advance to deal a blow to them. The Wind Chaser Cavalry Regiment had long understood the 6th Young Master's battle plan. After taking down the war horses of the Twin Cities, Malian City, they also brought their troops here. When they met up with the main force, they found out that they had actually taken down a total of 2,018 war horses. Although more than 20 of them had suffered some damage, they only needed to rest for a while to recover. This was 100 times more effective than the 550 war horses they had obtained, and losing 50 of them. This result made the Wind Chaser cavalry soldiers stop looking down on them. They were all wondering what kind of methods this main force had to complete the mission so beautifully. Just like Wind Chaser's cavalry, they also had the ability to attack Bai Ming's 2,000 war horses. They could even guarantee that they would be the final victor by relying on their more powerful methods. However, the effect was definitely not that good. Even the Wind Chaser Cavalry Regiment was beaten half to death. Looking at the main force of the mercenaries, there was not a single casualty. This result was really hard to understand. Yang Qindong did not have the intention to explain it to them because it would not take long for the facts to be placed in front of them. When the flintlock showed its power, all words would be pale and powerless. Taking advantage of the fact that the Bai Ming army had not reacted, Yang Qindong had already led the main force out of the Jianzhou left guard sphere of influence. He did not feel any psychological pressure or guilt for killing more than 2,000 Ming soldiers this time. Although the Ming army was also composed of Han people, this army could not be used by him for the time being. It might even become his enemy in the future. Of course, he would not be polite to the enemy. The Han people he wanted were not people who were willing to die for the Ming dynasty. Not to mention, Bai Ming's Shen Kuan had tried to assassinate him. If this was the case, he would not be polite when killing people. Yang Qindong did not hesitate to kill people. At this time, the Jianzhou Northern Guard, the Lianmao Guard, and the Shuangqing Guards had already become a pot of porridge. It was already night time, but there was no news at all. When the Twin Cities Guard's 1,000 households chief, He Ying, sent people to Horn Mountain Call, from the mouths of the ignorant commoners, they only learned of the existence of a great battle. As for who killed who and who won in the end, they had absolutely no idea. They continued to search. The 3 cities sent the most outstanding coroner. It took them a full 3 days to find the huge pit with the bodies of 2,018 people buried in the Stone Mountain area. Only then did the commander of the Jianzhou Left Guard, Chun Dula, know that it was a force that destroyed all their cavalry. However, all information about this enemy seemed to have been cut off, and they could not find anything. Chun Dula had no choice but to report this to Song Quan, the commander of the newer cadre city. It was inevitable that he would be scolded and reprimanded. However, they still did not know who the enemy was. At this time, Yang Qindong had already brought the mercenary army to the west of Narcissus Town, 20 li away. Su Yunsheng and the scouts sent by Commander Dingshan had already gotten a general idea of the town's situation. From the information the scouts sent back, Narcissus Town was a large town with a resident population of around 50,000 people. Most of them were Nuzan people, and there were also Mongols, Han people, Jalimi, Ki, Kuwu, Dor, and other races. This place was a hodgepodge, because the closest Ming army, near Narcissus Town, was 300 li away. This place was like an otherworldly paradise. It was a place that belonged to the Nururgan Dusi, and was not under the control of the Ming army. In the Ming dynasty's first year of Yongle, 1403, Ming dynasty Emperor Zhu Di sent people to Heilongjiang and Wassuli rivers to recruit the Nuzan people. In the 14th year of Zhengtong, 1449, the Mongol imperial tutor Yesen of Wara attacked the Ming dynasty. He defeated the Ming dynasty army at Tumu Castle and almost captured Mingyingzhong. Some Jianzhou and Haishi guards took the chance to attack Liaodong to cooperate with Yeshen's military operations. However, there were also quite a number of Nuzan guards who were attacked by Yi Shiwen. Many of the hereditary leaders of the Nuzan guards were robbed by Yi Shiwen and lost their hereditary credentials. Later on, they could only pay tribute in the name of the imperial secretariat. However, the rewards they received were much less than before. However, after the Ming dynasty split into north and south, the Nuzan people here started to get restless. Since then, the Ming dynasty's pressure on the Nuzan started to weaken, and they slowly lost control. Some leaders even dared to challenge the Ming dynasty and rob the Liaodong region. It was around this time that the Nuzan language was lost. The Nuzan people mainly used Mongol as their written language, and a small portion of them used Chinese. What was different from history was that the Jianzhou Guards, Jianzhou Left Guards, and Jianzhou Right Guards formed a strong tribe under the Ming dynasty. The appearance of the Jianzhou 3 Guards marked the formation of the Manchu people and the expansion of their power. However, due to the appearance of Yang Qindong, the Ming dynasty was split into north and south. Baiming gave more support to New Urgan Dusi, so the Jianzhou 3 Guards were still in the hands of Baiming. Speaking of which, if Narcissus Town wanted to not be controlled by the Ming dynasty, it was impossible to rely on its location. Another reason was that there were 2 strong cavalry forces here. The strongest one was under the Nuzan's command, and the weaker one was under the Mongols' command. From the information provided by the scouts, the Nuzan's commander was called Borte. He had 4,000 cavalry under him, and even the surrounding Baiming guards were afraid of him. The Mongol general was called Bagan. He had 2,500 cavalry under him. Although he was slightly weaker than the Nuzan, he had a strong background and power as a Mongol. Most of the time, even Borte had to give him some face. 6,500 elites who were good at riding and archery were already more than the 5,600 Ming guards. Unless Ming was willing to send out 3 or more guards, it would be difficult to take advantage of the situation here. In fact, some of the nearby Ming guards were also from the Nuzan tribe. If they were to attack Narcissus Town, it was guaranteed that they would not help. They would even inform the Ming beforehand. This was also the reason why Narcissus Town existed and why Ming did not come to raid. Raiding referred to plundering resources through war. It was usually used by nomads, but it was also used by Ming against Narcissus Town. Narcissus Town continued to develop in its own way due to its unique geographical environment. Their main way of life was hunting, fishing, or raising various kinds of livestock for a living. Among them were horses. In fact, many of these horses were born from wild horses, which made them the best choice for war horses in the future. The reason why Yang Qindong came to Narcissus Town was because of the horses that they raised. If he could get his hands on them, there was a high chance that they could become war horses. This would greatly increase the mercenaries' ability to survive on the grasslands. 6,500 cavalry. Yang Qindong shook his head after reading the information that the scouts sent back. It was difficult for him to take down so many cavalry in one go. Even if he could, he would have to consider his own casualties. Whether it was the Nuzan or the Mongol, they were not his main opponents. It was not worth it and meaningless to waste his energy here. How about this? Let Commander Dingshan go and see how many war horses he can buy from them. As long as they meet our standards, we will leave this place and head to the Tatar region. He had no intention of fighting with the Nuzan and the Mongol. Although he wanted to use this opportunity to teach the Nuzan cavalry a lesson, it was not worth it if he had to pay a high price. Chapter 642. Yang Qindong didn't want to make things difficult for them. Ding Shan received the order and went to Narcissus Town 20 miles away. He reported his name and said he wanted to meet the general of the Nuzan division, Borte. He didn't mention Yang Qindong and the mercenaries' names because this place was ill-informed and didn't know what they were talking about. This time, Ding Shan reported that he was from the Red Banner Army. The Red Banner Army had some influence in the Nurgan-Dusi region. The Nuzan cavalry reported Ding Shan's identity to the general. Borte was currently in a large house with 2 of his generals. They were discussing how to deal with the Mongol general, Bagan. During this period of time, Bagan had started to recruit soldiers again. He had actually attracted the attention of most of the young men in the town by offering them 5 taels of silver and 20 kilograms of meat for a month's service. It was said that many people had already signed up. Once Bagan's influence expanded, he would become a threat to Borte. This was something he didn't want to see. Moreover, Bagan had already broken the rules. According to the agreement, no matter who it was, they could recruit, but the standard of treatment was the same. 2 taels of silver and 5 kilograms of meat a month. Under the same standard, the townspeople could join whichever side they wanted. That being said, the Nuzan division had 4,000 cavalry, while the Mongols only had 2,500. With this comparison, the people who wanted to join the army naturally knew which side to choose. Choosing the strong over the weak, this was the mentality of most people. In this way, the so-called fairness did not exist. This made Borte stronger and stronger, and Bagan weaker and weaker. Left with no choice, Bagan could only break the rules. He was willing to pay more just to attract more people to join his cavalry. A burly man was sitting to the left of Borte. After hearing the general's words, he slammed the table and said with an irritable tone, "Bagan is breaking the rules. Since that's the case, I suggest we send troops to beat him up and let him know who has the final say in Narcissus Town. General Hulu, please calm down. Borte wasn't angry when he saw how impatient his subordinates were. Instead, he was secretly happy. He liked people like Hulu, who was straightforward and didn't hide anything. When he used such people, he felt more assured. General Hulu had already expressed his opinion. Borte's gaze fell on the man on his right. This man's name was Hui Libu, and his thoughts were clearly much deeper. Hui Libu didn't immediately express his decision. Instead, he pondered for a moment and said, "Of course we don't care about Bagan. We have 4,000 cavalrymen. As long as we attack, they won't be able to hold on for long. They will be defeated in the end. But don't forget, behind them is the powerful Mongol Empire. Although their territory is far from here, once the news spreads out, who can guarantee that they won't have any ideas about us? If a group of 5,000 Mongol cavalry comes, how are we going to deal with them? If we fight, can we win?" Hulu originally wanted to say something, but after hearing this, he had no choice but to shut his mouth. Borte let out a long sigh in his heart. The Mongol Empire was too powerful. They were so powerful that he had to think carefully before doing anything to Bagan. If the terrifying consequences were to come, he wouldn't be able to bear it. In his heart, he wanted to use Narcissus Town to develop and strengthen himself, and not attract other people to attack him. In order to achieve this goal, he didn't even forcefully recruit soldiers in the town, because he knew that there would be spies from the Ming army here. Currently, he only had 4,000 cavalrymen, so the Ming army wouldn't see him as a threat. However, if he recruited all the men in the town, then his power would instantly increase by several times. This would naturally attract the attention of the Ming army. When that time comes, if the Ming army sent an army to surround him, then he wouldn't even be able to survive. If that's the case, are we just going to watch Bagan grow stronger and stronger until he becomes a threat to us? Borte sighed and said in a dissatisfied tone, "Perhaps we can send someone to discuss with Bagan. After all, it's not like we can't make the same offer. At worst, we can do the same. I'm sure the men in the town will still choose to join us," General Hui Libu said in a testing manner. Although due to the environment, they didn't have a lot of money, but it wasn't like they didn't have any. If they were really desperate, they could make the same offer. At worst, both sides would suffer losses. "Looks like we have no choice but to do as he said." Borte nodded. This was the result he had expected. However, this way, the amount of money he had would shrink by a lot. If this continued without enough income, he might not even be able to afford military expenses one day. Just as Borte nodded and made his decision, a soldier walked in from outside and knelt on the ground. "General, there is someone who claims to be from the 5-Star Army who wants to see you." The 5-Star Army. Borte wasn't unfamiliar with this name. He knew that this was an army of thousands of cavalrymen and that they had some fighting power. However, that was all. After all, he was 3 times stronger than them. Yes, did the person say what he wanted? No. The person who came called himself Dingshan. He said he had business to discuss with you. As for what business, he didn't dare to tell us. The soldier knelt on the ground and answered truthfully. "Business? Then let him in." Borte smiled. This was a normal thing to do. This was because they could get green mouse fur, as well as things that were urgently needed outside, like gerfalcon and pearls. For this reason, it wasn't strange for ordinary merchants to contact him. However, these merchants would usually appear in early spring and late autumn. It was already summer, and there weren't many merchants who still wanted to discuss business with him. With curious gazes, Hulu and General Hui Libu didn't move at all. They were also curious about what business this Dingshan from the Red Banner wanted to discuss with them. The personal guard left and quickly returned. Behind him was Dingshan, who had a smile on his face. When this person entered the room, he very humbly cupped his fist and greeted Borte and the other two. Dingshan greets the three generals. Greetings to the three generals. Yes, are you Dingshan from the 5-star army? May I ask what position you hold there? Hui Li Bu took the initiative to ask. He also played the role of the vanguard. He couldn't let the general personally deal with the trivial matters. This lowly one's talent is limited. I am only a company commander. Dingshan still had a smile on his face. It was indescribable sincerity. Company commander? Hui Li Bu frowned. He clearly hadn't heard of this position before. Company commander? How many men does Brother Dingshan have under his command? Oh, only 100. Dingshan was still smiling as he spoke. He didn't have the slightest self-deprecation because he could only lead 100 men. 100? He. When Borte and the other two heard that the other party was only a centurion, they couldn't help but laugh. Wasn't the position of company commander supposed to be a very prestigious one? They didn't think that he was only a centurion, right? Dingshan must have known that he was embarrassed to say it out loud because of his position. That's why he purposely said that he was a company commander. In the end, the three of them still saw through his identity. Sai, who knew what the 5-star army was thinking. They actually only sent a centurion to meet him. Were they looking down on him? Borte. And the other two seemed to have thought of something. A trace of anger appeared on their faces. When Dingshan saw this, he naturally knew that their hearts had changed. He sighed in his heart. You don't know how powerful the 5-star army is. Sending me here is already giving you enough face. Of course, he couldn't say these words. Even if he said it, no one would believe him. Thinking about his mission, he put away his original smile and said as seriously as possible, 3 generals, this time I actually came here to make a deal with you. I think that in front of benefits, my identity shouldn't be important. Yes, Hui couldn't hold back his anger. You said a deal, then tell us the content and amount of the deal. They didn't immediately refuse because they wanted to wait for Dingshan to finish speaking before humiliating him. After all, he was only a centurion. They didn't think that he could take out anything to tempt them. Ignoring the other party's somewhat cold attitude, Dingshan finally opened his mouth. 3 generals, the 5-star army came here to buy war horses. We know that your noble family has a lot of war horses. Since they are eating for free, why not sell them to us? Isn't that the best of both worlds? Buy horses? You want to buy war horses? Hui Li still didn't say anything. Then he laughed and said, Ding, company commander, right? How many horses do you want? What price can you pay? He purposely emphasized the word few to mock Dingshan. With his identity as a mere centurion, what could he do? Even if he wanted to buy war horses, he would only buy a few. Although the war horses were the main source of income for the Nuzan tribe, if it was only a few, they wouldn't put it in their eyes. A few? Dingshan mocked the other party in his heart. Then his tone changed into a very arrogant one. He had thought about it. Who said that merchants had to lower their heads? That was a small merchant. He was a big merchant. Since he was a big merchant, he didn't have to look at other people's faces. It was others who had to look at his mood. Dingshan's tone also changed. At this moment, it was as if he was a different person. 3 generals, you must be mistaken. The 5-star army doesn't want a few horses. We can buy as many as you have. As for the price, it can be discussed. Chapter 643. Originally, she didn't care. If it wasn't for the fact that she didn't want to make enemies, she would have already kicked Ding Shan out of here. Ding Shan was just a small force with only 1,000 soldiers. She wasn't afraid of him. But all of this changed with Ding Shan's words. As if he thought he didn't hear it clearly, Borte asked, "Wait a minute, what did Company Commander Ding say?" Seeing that even Borte was shocked by him, Ding Shan's sense of superiority immediately increased, thinking that a big shop can bully customers, but at the same time, a big customer can also bully the shop. He regained his previous smile and said, "I said that there is no limit to the number of war horses you can buy. We will buy as many as you can provide. The price will also satisfy you." Hiss! This time they heard it clearly, but because of this, Borte and the other two sucked in a breath of cold air. They didn't expect the 5-star army to be such a big customer. They also didn't expect them to be so rich. Borte was just worried that he didn't have enough money to face the Mongol army. He didn't expect that the heavens would send him a god of wealth so quickly. Borte, who didn't care about the other party before, immediately smiled. "Ha! Come, prepare a seat for Company Commander Ding." Just a moment ago, Ding Shan had been standing in the middle of the hall, surrounded by Borte and the other two. It was as if he was being interrogated by the 3 judges. Now that he heard that the other party was strong, his attitude immediately changed. This was the effect of strength. Immediately, a bodyguard entered the main hall and brought over a long table. A blanket was prepared for them to sit on. Ding Shan didn't regard himself as an outsider. He cupped his hands and smiled to express his gratitude. Then he sat down at the long table and casually picked up a bowl of wine on the table and poured it into his mouth. Then he praised the wine. Ding Shan purposely displayed a heroic appearance, and even when he drank, he downed a bowl in one gulp. This instantly attracted the goodwill of Borte and the other two, especially Hulu. He was originally a straightforward person, and when he drank, he naturally liked to drink to his heart's content. Seeing that Ding Shan seemed to be a kindred spirit, he laughed heartily and revealed a sincere smile, drinking a bowl of wine with him from afar. After drinking 2 bowls of wine in a row, Ding Shan's expression didn't change, nor did his heart beat wildly. He looked at Borte, who was sitting at the head of the table, and said with a smile, "General, can we discuss the price and the number of war horses?" "Okay. Now that Company Commander Ding has taken the initiative to come here, you can name the price." Borte said with a smile, looking like an old fox. The other party wanted to listen to his opinion. This was a matter of planning before taking action. Ding Shan did not have any objections to this. After all, this was the other party's territory. Of course, he would let the other party have the final say. "Okay, since the general has spoken, then this little one will name the price. For a batch of good quality war horses, we offer 120 taels. This is already the highest price in the market. As long as the war horses arrive, we will pay the money. It's only a few 100,000 taels of silver. Our 5-star army doesn't have anything else, but we have a lot of money." Ha ha ha. Ding Shan was very confident. Borte and the other two also believed in this point. If the other party didn't prepare enough money, then what right did they have to talk about cooperation? Besides, if they didn't have enough money, then weren't they afraid that they would flip out? One must know that this was the Jurchen's territory. Moreover, their military strength was several times greater than the other parties. No one would take the initiative to provoke such a powerful existence. As for the price of 120 taels of silver for a horse, this was indeed very fair. In the market, ordinary horses were usually sold for around 30 taels of silver. War horses were usually sold for 100 to 120 taels of silver. Very few excellent horses could be sold for a sky-high price of 150 taels of silver. However, That was referring to the price of delivery. This time, the other party had taken the initiative to come to Narcissus Town. Therefore, they only needed to hand over the goods to the other party. Just this alone would save them a lot of transportation costs and risks. From this point of view, 120 taels of silver was indeed tempting. However, in this world, who wouldn't want more money? Since this was a business that was delivered to his doorstep, and Ding Shan looked like he was determined to get it, Borte naturally had no reason to let it go easily. Therefore, even though his heart skipped a beat when he heard the price of 120 taels of silver for a war horse, he did not show it on the surface. He shook his head and said, "The price is too low." Ding Shan had naturally thought deeply before offering 120 taels of silver for a horse. Yes, Zhang Mingji had indeed seen the price of one war horse at 200 taels of silver. However, the other party had no intention of doing business with him. They were prepared to rob him. The facts proved this point. After finding Zhang Mingji's corpse in Hornhill Call, they did not find any large amount of money on him or in the group. This time, Ding Shan really wanted to make a deal with him. However, the other party still thought that the price was too low. This was a bit insatiable. Ding Shan argued with reason. "General Borte, we are here to buy from you. You only need to send the war horses out of Narcissus Town, and our deal will be considered complete. This will save you a lot of trouble." I said the price is too low. Borte had no intention of reasoning with Ding Shan. He still held on to his previous idea and repeated it. Ding Shan really wanted to leave in a huff. He could see Borte's greed. However, when he remembered that the sixth young master was waiting for his news outside the town, he had to forcefully suppress the thought of leaving. He then looked at Borte and said, "General, how much do you think is appropriate?" 150 taels of silver for one. We can guarantee the quality of the war horses. If you don't like any of them, you can return them to us." Borte said proudly, as if the war horses of the Nuzin were the best. This war horse was equivalent to an extra 30 taels of silver. In this way, if they bought 4 war horses, they would lose 1 war horse. It was a bit of a loss. However, before coming here, the sixth young master had said that as long as the war horses were of good quality, it did not matter if they had to pay a little more. What the mercenaries lacked now was war horses. They could not afford to delay important matters because of a little money. Thinking of this, Ding Shan finally gritted his teeth and agreed. "All right, since that is the case, I agree to this price. However, I do not know how many war horses the general can sell so that I can go back and prepare the money." Ding Shan actually agreed. He thought that in the face of such an exorbitant demand, the other party would definitely hesitate. Even if he got up and left now, it would be normal for him to come back a few days later. Even if he had to settle it today, he would have raised the price. For example, 130 taels of silver or 140 taels of silver would have been fine. However, the other party did not say anything and just agreed. This was indeed out of Borte and the other two's expectations. However, at the same time, they were overjoyed. If one war horse could be sold for an extra 30 taels of silver, they would be able to make a lot more money. With this money, wouldn't they be able to compete with the Mongol army on the issue of new recruits? Haha, good. Company Commander Ding is indeed a straightforward person. Since that is the case, this general will also be a little more generous. I will sell you 1,000 war horses for 150 taels of silver each. Borte laughed loudly, as if he was afraid that Ding Shan would go back on his words. He quickly settled the matter. 1,000 war horses. This number was not low. Perhaps the Nuzin might have some extra, but the quality was good. It was not easy to get so many war horses. This was also what made Ding Shan satisfied. All right, The total is 150,000 taels of silver. I will bring the money to trade in 2 days. All right, 2 days it is. Borte also agreed to this decision. Then, both sides looked at each other and laughed. After the business was finished, Borte originally wanted to ask Ding Shan to stay for a meal, but the other party said that he had something else to do and refused. After leaving the Nuzan's camp, he went to the Mongol camp. Very quickly, he also finished the business of 1,000 war horses. The only difference was that the other party accepted the price of 120 taels of silver each. Ding Shan's actions naturally did not escape Borte's eyes. When he knew that this person had gone to the Mongol camp to do business, his expression became somewhat ugly. He originally thought that, with this amount of money, he would be able to compete with the Mongol Bagan. However, the other party also sold 1,000 war horses. Although the price was lower than his, it was impossible for him to increase the gap between them. This made him somewhat discouraged. However, at the same time, he was also interested in Ding Shan and the 5-star army. This team was really rich. They were willing to spend 200,000 to 300,000 taels of silver without even blinking. This made him feel a great deal of envy and jealousy. General, I have already arranged for people to follow Ding Shan. I believe that the information regarding the 5-star army will be sent back soon. Hui Libu seemed to have seen through Borte's thoughts and took the initiative to add this sentence. Very good. Then let's wait and see how strong this 5-star army is. Humph, don't show off your wealth. If you don't have enough strength and still dare to show off like this, then you are not doing business. You are seeking death. At this moment, Borte's ambition had already begun to swell. He was eyeing the large amount of money in the hands of the 5-star army. After Ding Shan finished the business with the Nuzan and the Mongol, he left Narcissus Town and walked towards the mercenary camp 20 li away. He was the commander of a company under the direct command of the regiment. Normally, he would be a scout and scout. Naturally, he had already discovered that there was someone following him. However, he did not care. If it was in the past, he would have been more careful. Now that the 6th young master was here, their strength had increased greatly. What was there to be afraid of? Ding Shan quickly rode back to the camp. Behind him, the scout sent by General Hui Libu looked around the mercenary camp. After seeing the general situation, he also left. Not long after, the information regarding the mercenary camp was passed to Borte and Hui Libu. Chapter 644. 3,000 cavalrymen, 2,000 infantrymen, and many horses were used to transport goods. Borte and Huili looked at each other after hearing the report from their spies. This was different from what they knew about the 5-star army, which only had a little over 1,000 cavalrymen. Of course, if they knew that Yang Chendong had originally planned to equip all the soldiers with war horses, it would be best if each soldier had 2. However, due to the limited number of war horses, the 3 Cold Vanguard regiments and 2 auxiliary battalions were converted into a cavalry regiment. The remaining horses were not suitable to be war horses and could only be used to transport goods. If that was the case, they wouldn't be interested in the 5-star army. This force should be the 5-star army's newly expanded force. They shouldn't have much combat power. If we can catch them off guard, we can definitely defeat them. Not only that, we can also obtain their money, war horses, and even their soldiers. When that happens, our forces will almost double. When we face Bagan, the pressure will be much greater. Huili muttered to himself for a moment before becoming excited. The greater the difficulty, the greater the result. Huili's words coincided with Borte's thoughts. He immediately made up his mind and said with a ferocious expression, "All right, we should also make some preparations. How about this? Mobilize the cavalrymen. In 2 days, we will use the trade as an excuse to take over the enemy." in the mercenary camp 20 miles away from Narcissus Town. Dingshan reported the details of his trip to Yangqingdong and the other battalion commanders. When they heard that Borte had offered 150 silvers for a war horse, many of the officers were enraged. It was obvious that they were angry at Borte's exorbitant demand. He was clearly treating them like fat sheep to be slaughtered. Yangqingdong didn't feel much about it. It was just an extra 30,000 silvers. He really didn't care about it. However, he had seen and remembered Qi Taiying's greed. Once he had the chance, he would definitely repay Qi Taiying for what he had done today. Yangqingdong only wanted to settle this matter first. He didn't want to immediately become enemies with Borte. Borte's strength wasn't weak. Unless they used firearms, they wouldn't be able to take advantage of him. Besides, even if it was just because of 30,000 taels of silver, there was no need to start a war. This excuse was not enough. However, no one expected that an excuse would appear so quickly. Su Yunsheng, the commander of the reconnaissance battalion, appeared in the large tent and delivered the news he had just received from Narcissus Town to Yangqingdong and the other officers. 6th Young Master, Nuren is making a move. Our people spent a lot of money to get in touch with some of the Nuzan's cavalry. We just got the news from their mouths. In 2 days, they will be moving out in full armor. As for who the target is, the higher-ups didn't say. As soon as Su Yunsheng entered the tent, he reported the first-hand information that the scouts had received. Armor was usually only worn during military operations. After all, the heavy armor wasn't very comfortable to wear. The operation would take place 2 days later. It was probably very clear who the target was. No one would believe that the Nuzan would have other military plans 2 days later. Ha ha ha! Yangqingdong couldn't help but laugh when he heard the news. He had indeed come to Narcissus Town to buy a horse. This place was quite far from Baiming's garrison. Not only would there be fewer restrictions on buying a horse here, it wouldn't attract too much attention either. At the same time, he also wanted to see the Nuzan's strength. However, he really didn't want to start a war here. It wasn't worth it. However, if others took the initiative to provoke him, then the situation would be completely different. Were mercenaries afraid of trouble? Obviously, they weren't. As long as they were angered, no matter how strong the opponent was or what they looked like, there was only one word: fight. Now, Yangqingdong had the elite Cold Vanguard 3rd Regiment in his hands. Reality proved that although the Windchaser Cavalry Regiment wasn't the strongest and wasn't at the level of a first-class regiment, it was still possible for them to become a first-class regiment. If the Nuzan still dared to target him with such a strong army, it could only mean one thing. The other party's appetite was too big and too greedy. It was no wonder that in history, they had the idea of targeting the great Ming dynasty more than 100 years later. This was their nature, and it wouldn't be easy to change. It was a pity that they had provoked mercenaries this time. Yangqingdong wasn't going to be polite to them. With the number of cavalry he had, he might have to pay a high price to attack the other party. However, if he had to defend himself, it would be much easier. When Yangqingdong laughed, Tiger's Mane and Beta Persei, who knew him better, also laughed. This was the 6th Young Master's signature move. This kind of laughter showed that the 6th Young Master was angry. The consequence of being angry was definitely going to be a big battle. Both of them loved to fight, so they were naturally happy. Come, everyone, don't leave. Let's discuss the military battle plan in 2 days. Yangqingdong took the initiative to walk to the sand table and looked at his position. The Nuzan suddenly made a move. As one of their opponents, she naturally couldn't escape the eyes of the Mongol army. Both sides relied on Narcissus Town. The Nuzan and the Mongol army had long been in each other's shoes. It was very difficult for either side to do something behind the other's back. Therefore, in terms of news, Begin received it much earlier than Yang Qindong. His general, Temu, was in charge of recruiting new soldiers when he was urgently called to the barracks by Begin. He was informed of what might happen in 2 days. General, is Borte planning to attack the 5-star army? Although Temu was tall, he wasn't stupid. He quickly thought of a possibility. That should be the case. Otherwise, do you think they would dare to attack our army? Begin said proudly. Although he wasn't as strong as the Nuzan in terms of military strength, he was a Mongol. The Mongol cavalry had once been invincible. Even now, although it had declined, a starving camel was still bigger than a horse. It wasn't something that just anyone could provoke. The Baiming army might have the guts, but the Nuzan soldiers, led by Borte, definitely wouldn't. Since they couldn't attack them, they could only attack the 5-star army that had just arrived. When Ding Shan appeared here today, he looked like a child of wealth. It was no wonder that Borte and the others would have such thoughts. Temu found out from Begin that Ding Shan wanted to buy 1,000 war horses. He couldn't help but worry. General, it seems like the 5-star army is very rich. However, the more it is so, the more we can't let them succeed. Otherwise, once they obtain the 5-star army's resources, their strength will become unstoppable. The gap between our two sides will only widen. This will be disadvantageous in the future. That's right. Begin nodded heavily. This was the reason why he called Temu over. General, what do you plan to do? Temu knew that since Begin had made his intentions clear, he must have thought of a countermeasure. However, he didn't know what to do next. Begin didn't answer immediately. He seemed to be hesitating as well. After a few breaths, he said, "We have 3 options now. First, we take the initiative to look for Borte. Since there are benefits, we naturally can't let them take it all for themselves. We can work together to eliminate the 5-star army and share the benefits. Second, we can work together with the 5-star army and fight Borte together. This way, we can achieve our goal of severely injuring him. From then on, we will become the strongest force in Narcissus Town. Third, we can secretly inform the 5-star army of Borte's intention to attack and wait until both sides are heavily injured before we suddenly attack and reap the benefits." There were 3 options to choose from. At this moment, Temu was silent. He was considering the feasibility of the 3 options in his mind. The first option didn't seem to make sense. They could obviously take all the benefits for themselves. Why would the Nuzan share the benefits with them? At least, if it were them, they definitely wouldn't be willing to share the benefits with others. As for the second option, although it might severely injure the Nuzan, the benefits would be very limited. Without money, they wouldn't be able to expand. If Narcissus Town didn't have a strong force, it would only attract the attention of the Baiming army. It might even cause them to send troops to deal with Narcissus Town. On the other hand, there was only the third option. If it went well, not only would they be able to get rid of Borte, but they would also be able to obtain enough money from the 5-star army to develop themselves. As long as they had money, they would be able to attract more people to join them. Once their force grew, it would be much more difficult for the Baiming army to deal with them. This was the only way for them to develop and survive. The third option. Temu made his decision after weighing the options in his mind. Very good. Begin laughed and nodded. It was obvious that he was leaning towards the third option. Now that he had reached an agreement with Temu, they could go and make preparations. They were like the mantis stalking the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind. Not long after the 2 generals reached an agreement, a Mongolian scout quietly left Narcissus Town and went to the mercenary camp 20 miles away. He passed on the news that Borte might deal with them in 2 days. In the tent, Tiger's Mane politely sent the Mongolian scout away. He then returned and stood beside Yang Qindong. Young master, you've guessed correctly. It seems that the Mongolian army has a lot of ideas. Ha! This is a world where the strong prey on the weak. It's normal for them to have a lot of ideas. The key is still strength. Without enough strength, even if you're smart, you can only protect yourself. Yang Qindong maintained a confident smile on his face. He had said before that it was impossible for the Mongolian army to not interfere in such an important matter. Not long after he said that, they indeed made their move. Chapter 645. Humph, if you want to take advantage of us, then you should be prepared to be swallowed by us. Yang Qindong's eyes flashed with wisdom. If the Mongol army did not have any intentions of attacking them, he would not spend so much effort to deal with them. However, since they had such thoughts, he could only give them a taste of their own medicine. What Mongol background? This might be able to scare the Nuzan, but it was not enough to enter Yang Qindong's eyes at all. If they made him unhappy, he could also deal a heavy blow to the Mongol army. As long as General Bagan wanted to deal with him, the mercenaries would not hold back in the slightest. In this regard, Yang Qindong had already made preparations. 2 days was more than enough for him to complete his plan. The Nuzan cavalry was actively making preparations. It was not that Borte did not think that the 5-star army would resist, but in his opinion, the Nuzan cavalry was the strongest cavalry in the world. If they really fought, even the Mongol cavalry would not be their match. There was no way they would lose this battle. If they succeeded in their surprise attack, the battle would be over in less than 2 hours. On the other hand, the problem was Bagan's 2,500 cavalry. If this person interfered, it would be troublesome. As a precaution, Borte purposely left General Hui Libu behind and gave him 1,000 cavalrymen to keep an eye on Bagan. Once Bagan made a move, he was to restrain him. Although they didn't have the advantage in numbers, they didn't intend to severely injure Bagan. As long as they could keep Bagan in the vicinity of the town, they could wait until the 5-star army was completely annihilated. Bagan would then tactfully become obedient. As a result, they only sent 3,000 cavalry to fight the mercenaries. Hulu was the vanguard, while Borte led the middle. Regarding this, Yang Qindong was not very clear. After all, the scouts he sent out only knew that the Nuzan cavalry had a mission. As for what the mission was, they would not know until the morning of the day after tomorrow. But whether it was 3,000 or 4,000 enemies, Yang Qindong wasn't afraid. It was just a defensive battle. Even if Borte and Bagan joined hands, he wouldn't be afraid. Time passed bit by bit. On the surface, the 5-star army did not make any movements during the day and seemed to be waiting for the transaction 2 days later. However, as soon as night fell, the army began to get busy. Ding Shan's direct cavalry regiment was also responsible for the role of sentry posts. They would chase away the Nuzan cavalry, who were responsible for scouting until the sun came up, and they would only let them in again after daybreak. This practice did not arouse the suspicion of others. After all, everyone was afraid of being attacked at night. For the sake of safety, the vigilance at night was stricter than during the day. This was understandable. Therefore, this matter was only reported to Borte symbolically. Nobody paid any attention to it. They were completely unaware that a large number of mines had been quietly buried in the front of the mercenary camp. A portion of these mines had been modified by Crimson City's ordnance stones in the later stages. They were called passive detonation mines or passive mines. These mines weren't very powerful, but they could be used to deal with cavalry. They played a role in disrupting the morale of the troops. The biggest difference between passive mines and active mines was that the latter would explode when stepped on, while the former required a long rope to detonate. This could greatly ensure that the mines wouldn't hurt their own people. This was the new technology of the time. For example, the great Ming dynasty had already had mines. They buried a type of gun underground. When stepped on, it would detonate. The lethality wasn't very high, but it was enough to give people a headache. The appearance of passive landmines had indeed greatly improved this technology, ensuring that mercenaries could continue to advance in this era. In the future, as they continued to develop, remote-controlled landmines would also appear, which would greatly increase the distance of detonation. That would be the true power of this technology. While burying the mines at night was one thing, cavalry soldiers were also quietly sent out. They left the camp and disappeared into the night. In just 2 nights, the original Windchaser Cavalry Regiment, Cold Vanguard Regiment, and 2 auxiliary battalions had all left. The only ones remaining in the camp were Yang Qindong's 4 auxiliary battalions. Regarding Yang Qindong leaving so few soldiers by his side, both Windchaser Regiment and Commander Wu Sheng expressed their objections. Regarding this, Yang Qindong acted as if he didn't hear anything. He only instructed them to fight according to the plan. This was especially true for Wu Sheng's 3rd Regiment. This was their first time on horseback, and they had given up on the most advanced firearms. If they couldn't adapt, well, the danger factor on the battlefield would increase by a lot. It wasn't that they couldn't use firearms on horseback, but they would definitely lack stability and accuracy. Therefore, Yang Qindong's request was that unless they were confident, they should fight with cavalry swords. Since they were cavalry, they should be used to fighting on horseback and using cold weapons to hack and slash. Under Yang Qindong's insistence, the main force was finally sent out. Only 4 auxiliary battalions were left. They were led by Commander Lu Xue. Lu Xue was left behind. When he woke up on the morning of the 3rd day, his entire body was filled with nervousness and excitement. Yang Qindong saw all of this and couldn't help but smile. "Commander Lu, don't be so nervous. Everything is ready. You just need to do what you normally do in battle and training. Yes, don't be nervous. 6th Young Master, I'm just excited. Thank you for trusting our auxiliary soldiers and handing the heavy responsibility of protecting your safety to us." Lu Xue really wasn't nervous. He had fought dozens of battles, big and small. The nervousness of a new battlefield wouldn't appear on a veteran like him. But just as he said, he was truly excited. Yang Qindong had sent out all of the main force and only left 4 auxiliary battalions at home. If this wasn't trust in the auxiliary soldiers, then what was it? In reality, it was impossible for only 4 auxiliary battalions to be at home. For example, Guard Squad 1 and 2 and Ghost Sniper Squad were all left by Yang Qindong's side. These people added up to nearly 100. In reality, their strength was several times greater than their own. With these people around, Yang Qindong could be said to be safe enough. But if Lu Xue was willing to think this way, he naturally wouldn't correct him. "Good. It's good that you know this young master trusts you. Since it's like this, perform well today." Yang Qindong chuckled. Then he looked at Ding Shan, who had been standing beside him for a long time, and said, "Company Commander Ding, it's about time. You can leave now. Remember, don't be rash. Just follow the plan, and there won't be any problems." "Yes, 6th Young Master, I will remember." Ding Shan was a little nervous and nodded respectfully. This was the 6th Young Master. To be able to be remembered and stand beside him for a while was something to be proud of. Everything was ready, except for the east wind. This east wind referred to the arrival of the transaction time. After Ding Shan received the order, he led a company of his subordinates and rode out of the camp with the 150,000 taels of silver, rushing towards the area 10 li ahead. At the same time, the Nuzan cavalry in Narcissus Town also started to move. General Hulu was the vanguard, and Borte was the center of the army. They brought 3,000 cavalrymen out of the town. Only General Hulu was left behind to watch the Mongol cavalry's every move. Borte has left. Humph! How arrogant! He didn't even see an extra war horse. It's obvious that he wants to make a move. Temu brought a few soldiers and watched the Nuzan cavalry leave the town. Then he returned to report to Ba Jen. Very good. Looks like our guess was right. Since that's the case, let's get ready to move. Ha ha! Ba Jen chuckled. At this moment, his eyes were filled with excitement. If this matter was settled well, Narcissus Town would be his leader in the future. The Mongol cavalry under his command would also welcome a great opportunity for development. Temu nodded heavily and turned around to gather the troops. Previously, to prevent their intentions from being discovered by the Nuzan, they didn't even tell the cavalrymen that there was a battle mission today. It would take some time to gather the troops now. Borte set off. 3,000 cavalrymen marched out until they were about 10 miles away from the 5-star army. That was also the location of the transaction that both sides had agreed on. It was about 10 miles away from each other's territory. No one had to worry about an ambush. In reality, neither side had arranged any troops to ambush within 10 miles. Borte didn't care about it. As long as his cavalry charged forward, what kind of enemy would be their match? Yang Qindong had prepared enough backup plans. He was worried that he would alert the enemy. Naturally, he didn't arrange any troops to ambush them at the location of the transaction. Therefore, when both sides appeared here in the dark, they were very calm. However, when Ding Shan looked forward and saw that General Hulu, who had drunk a bowl of wine with him, didn't even bring an extra war horse, he couldn't help but frown. General Hulu, I've brought the silver. Where are the war horses we need? Ha ha! The war horses are right in front of you. We're riding on them. How about it? They're all good breeds, right? Hulu chuckled and said shamelessly. Hulu's vanguard was exactly 1,000 cavalrymen. It was the same as the 1,000 war horses they had agreed on. Although the numbers were correct, Ding Shan didn't believe it. His expression turned cold as he asked, General Hulu, it's rare for you to drink to your heart's content. How can you be so unreliable? Since you don't have any sincerity, then we'll talk about it when you do. Let's go. Ding Shan was very decisive. He led the 100 cavalrymen and left without any hesitation. From how quickly they retreated, it was obvious that this wasn't a decision they had just made. They had been prepared for this for a long time. Chapter 646. Hulu was stunned by the sudden change in the situation. His mission was to stall Ding Shan and wait for General Borte to arrive with the main force. Then, they would attack together and chase after Ding Shan's troops. They would attack the 5-star army's camp in one fell swoop. But now, Ding Shan had escaped before General Borte arrived. This was not in line with the plan. General, what should we do? Should we chase or wait for General Borte? The deputy general beside him was also confused by the scene in front of him. He asked Hulu for instructions. Chase. Leave one person behind to inform the general. The rest of you, follow me. Hulu, who was a straightforward person, decided not to wait any longer. Since there was a change in the plan, he would follow suit. Although 1,000 men was not enough, he was confident in the cavalry under his command. Even if the enemy was several times their number, they would still be able to fight and win. Leaving one person behind to inform the rear, Hulu led the 1,000 cavalry to chase after Ding Shan's 100 men. They shouted and screamed along the way, giving off the sound of their race's charge. Don't be too anxious. Maintain the formation and don't let them lose track of us." Riding on his horse, Ding Shan glanced back and sneered. He was the first to run, so he naturally had the advantage. As long as he was out of the range of the arrows, he would be able to complete his mission. The cavalry directly followed Ding Shan's left and right as they retreated back to the mercenary camp. After running for a while, they could see the camp in the distance. The 100 men immediately split into two groups, one on the left and one on the right. They gave up on the open space in the middle and returned to the camp. Far away from the camp, Yang Qindong and the 4 auxiliary battalions had been waiting for a long time. Behind them were the horses that were originally used for transportation. Now, all the goods on them had been unloaded. From afar, it looked like there were war horses everywhere. "Young master, Commander Ding is back." Tiger's mane pointed forward with a confident smile on his face. Hu Lu, who was in the middle of chasing, saw the prey in front of him split into two groups. He was stunned at first, but then a look of disdain appeared in his eyes. "Humph, you want to split up my troops? I won't fall for your trick. Come on, let's charge together." Hu Lu didn't seem to be fooled. He continued to charge forward with his 1,000 men. As the war horses continued to advance, they were getting closer and closer to the mercenary camp. 3 miles, 2.5 miles, 2 miles. When they finally reached the distance of 2 miles, deafening roars suddenly rang out beside the charging Nuzan cavalrymen. Finally, a cavalryman stepped into the minefield and detonated the mines buried there. Boom, boom, boom. Boom, boom, boom. There was a sudden explosion in the midst of the cavalry. In an instant, countless cavalrymen were blasted off their horses. Those who were on top of the landmines were blasted into the air along with their horses. Even the aftermath of the landmines injured countless Nuzan cavalrymen, causing them to wail in pain as they fell off their horses. Damn it! They had only advanced about 100 meters, but they had already paid the price of nearly 100 riders. This made Hu Lu gnash his teeth in anger. Seeing that they were still some distance away from the mercenary camp, he had no choice but to give the order to stop moving forward and gather his troops in place. As soon as Hu Lu's vanguard stopped, the 2,000 cavalrymen, led by Borte, rushed over. Seeing the mess on the ground and the many injured cavalrymen, Borte rode forward and asked coldly with a frown, "What happened?" They cheated. Hu Lu didn't know how to explain, so he simply attributed everything to the enemy's trick. Cheated? Borte was stunned at first, but after he heard what happened from Hu Lu, his face turned ugly. So, they were prepared. Humph! Do you really think that you can stop the advance of our cavalry with that explosive thing on the ground? Borte's face was filled with disapproval. Although the 5-star army's trick did hurt his troops, it was still a battle between the two sides. In the end, it was still a battle between two armies that depended on strength. It was still a real battle, and tricks were only supplementary. Besides, that thing had already exploded once, and it was impossible for it to explode a second time. How many cavalrymen did he have? Even if he sent them out one by one, they would still be able to cover a distance of 2 miles. At that time, it would be time for them to raise their butcher's knife and start a massacre. Oh, right, you said that Ding Shan didn't retreat to the middle, but to the sides. You didn't see anything exploding there, right? Although he didn't think so, it was better to not sacrifice himself if he didn't have to. Borte thought of something and asked Hu Lu. Yes, they went to the sides, so it was very safe. Thinking back to Ding Shan's retreat route, Borte thought that the enemy wanted to divide his troops. They already knew that there was something buried underground. Okay, Borte didn't care so much at this moment. He only knew that if the enemy could leave, they could also leave. Since that's the case, we will also split into 2 groups. You lead one group, and I will lead the other. We will rush in from both sides and outflank them. At that time, We will definitely let those people know that we, the Nusan cavalry, are not to be trifled with. Borte's face was burning with anger. In such a short time, more than 200 of his brothers had died, which clearly angered Borte. Yes, Hulu's face was also filled with anger. It was rare for him to be at a disadvantage like this. If the two sides met face to face, no matter what the result was, he would be able to accept it. If he couldn't win, then it was because his skills weren't as good as the enemy's. But to be able to succeed with a trick like this really made him feel bitter. The less than 3,000 cavalrymen began to split up. Borte went to the left, Hulu went to the right, and the two groups of cavalrymen began to advance from the sides, as if they were going to outflank the enemy. Young master, they are learning from Company Commander Ding. Tiger's Mane's eyesight was still very good. As soon as the other side made a move, he saw through it. At this moment, Yang Qindong was sitting on a bamboo chair. He didn't know where he got a paper fan in his hand. From time to time, he would brush it twice. At this time, Fan Xian really looked like Zhuge Liang on TV. He was completely strategizing and winning from 1,000 miles away. Listening to Tiger's Mane's words, Yang Qindong nodded lightly. This is originally a checkmate. No matter what choice they make, it is destined that there will only be one result. These words were said very calmly, without any emotion, as if the next thing to die in front of him was not 3,000 cavalrymen, but 3,000 ants that had nothing to do with him. These words were not just empty words. After 2 days of preparation, Yang Qindong really set up a dead end here. Even if the other side wanted to jump out now and did not want to fight anymore, it was still a dead end. When they were chasing Ding Shan, this net had already been cast. Now what they had to do was to close the net. Come on, signal the flag, cut off the enemy's retreat, and be ready to detonate the passive mines at any time. At the same time, order the 4 auxiliary battalions to be ready to fire. The calmer Yang Qindong was, the more excited Tiger's Mane was. This was his 6th young master. He was always so confident, and there was never anything that could stop him. Beta Persei, go and execute the order. Tiger's Mane turned around and said to the tall Beta Persei, who was the flag bearer, "Okay." Beta Persei stood up straight and began to wave the 2 red and black flags in his hands, constantly making various movements. With a series of movements, the ground under their feet seemed to move. Tremble, tremble! It was as if the earth was roaring, or as if an earth dragon was born. An earthquake is coming. This movement also caused the Jurchen cavalrymen, who had just split up to stop and watch. The ground behind them was filled with dust, covering the sky and the sun. Then, one by one, the cavalrymen in military green uniforms began to slowly appear in their sight. 1, 2, 3, they couldn't even count. Where did the reinforcements come from? When Borte saw the other side's neat uniform, his face changed drastically, and he spoke with a somewhat panicked voice. Didn't the scouts say that the 5th Star Army only had 3,000 cavalrymen? If that was the case, then where did the cavalrymen behind them come from? Could it be that the information was wrong? Or, no matter what, he was still a general who commanded an army? Borte's brain worked very quickly. After thinking for a while, his eyes suddenly lit up. He looked forward and said, "I know they sent all the cavalrymen behind us, and there aren't many enemies in front of us. They want to attack us from both sides. General, what should we do?" The Jurchen cavalrymen who followed Borte all asked with an ugly expression. It was supposed to be a one-sided massacre. Even if they encountered some resistance, it should be sporadic. How did they become dumpling fillings and were about to be wrapped up? The most frightening thing in a war was unexpected situations, because it often meant that one side had miscalculated. It meant that they had lost their innate advantage in wisdom and strategy. The unknown was the most frightening thing. Some people were already worried about what kind of serious consequences the general's miscalculation would bring to them. In other words, because of the unexpected situation, the Jurchen cavalryman's morale was already unstable. If this situation was allowed to develop, it might cause the morale of the cavalrymen to drop. If that happened, no matter how many soldiers they had, they wouldn't be able to fight back. Borte was very clear about this, and he naturally didn't want to see this happen. He immediately shouted, "Don't be afraid, the enemy's main force is behind us, and there aren't many enemies in front of us. As long as we are fast enough, we can completely defeat the enemy's main force. Then we will be able to gain a foothold, turn around, and destroy the enemy behind us. Victory will be ours." Chapter 6:47. Victory belongs to us. A few of the centurions behind Borte shouted in unison. Their shouts did indeed stabilize the morale of the troops. At this moment, not only did their morale not decrease, it actually increased. They slapped their war horses and charged forward. In their eyes, it was only a distance of 2 miles. They could reach the enemy with a single charge. The choice of the Nuzen cavalry was equivalent to announcing that they had given up all paths of retreat. There was only one way, and that was to charge and charge again. This choice naturally disappointed the cavalry division, the 3rd Regiment of the Cold Vanguard, and the 2 auxiliary cavalry battalions. This also meant that they had no chance of fighting a tough battle. This was especially so for the cavalry division led by Windchaser. They wanted to perform well and fight the legendary Nuzen cavalry head-on. But now, all their hopes were dashed. Even so, they had no intention of stopping. Instead, they continued to advance until they reached the place where Borte and Hulu were standing. Then, they took up their positions. Close to 3,000 cavalrymen lined up in a row. Each of them held a bow and arrow in their hands. They were ready to shoot, not allowing the enemy to retreat to their front. The cavalrymen no longer felt any pressure. At this moment, all the pressure was transferred to the battlefield. Loujois, the commander of the auxiliary troops, who had long been prepared, shouted out his orders. His 4 battalions of 1,600 auxiliary soldiers all held their Type 81 rifles in their hands and prepared to shoot at any moment. "Everyone, listen to my orders. Do not let any enemy within 400 meters of us go. Shoot!" Loujois shouted as loudly as he could. His voice was transmitted to the ears of every soldier. As soon as he shouted, a rain of bullets shot forward without stopping. It didn't look like it was going to stop anytime soon. The sound of gunfire was accompanied by an earth-shattering explosion. Under the leadership of Dao Xiao, the 2nd Guard Division began to pull on the long ropes in their hands, triggering the passive mines buried on both sides of the ground. Every time there was a loud bang, a large number of Nuzen cavalrymen would be inexplicably sent into the air. When they fell to the ground, no matter if it was the people or the horses, none of them could breathe. They were all as dead as they could be. Explosions and gunshots rang out, smashing into the advancing Nuzen cavalrymen like a club. This naturally caused the rhythm of the attack to come to a halt. Fortunately, these cavalrymen's equestrian skills were not bad. They did not collide with each other in this chaotic situation and cause secondary injuries. The Nuzen cavalrymen were all frightened by this scene, especially the cavalrymen in front and those within 400 meters of the 5-star army camp. After they were all turned into lifeless corpses, no one dared to charge forward. They only instinctively stopped their horses and stared at the front and back. The front was like a valley of death. Any cavalryman who dared to approach within 400 meters would die without exception. The distance of 400 meters was too far for the cavalrymen to catch up. They looked at the bows in their hands that could only shoot for 100 meters. They suddenly felt powerless. Behind them were countless enemy cavalrymen. There were rows and rows of them, as though they could not see the end of them. These cavalrymen held strong bows and arrows. Although they had not fired a single arrow, all of the Nuzen cavalrymen knew that once they turned around and charged forward, they would become the target of the arrow rain. They would be turned into porcupines in an instant. This was what it meant to be trapped in a dilemma. This result made Borte feel as if his brain had short-circuited. It was as if the previous plan was for them to appear in an unstoppable manner and win the final battle. But now, why did it seem like they had become the prey in the eyes of the enemy? They were trapped in a dilemma. Borte was not the only one who was confused. Even the cavalrymen led by Windchaser, who was their opponent, were confused. Other than Windchaser, Deng Yu, Gao Danhua, and Ding Shan, who were originally members of the Cold Vanguard, the others joined the Five-Star Army later. Most of them had not even seen the most advanced muskets before. How could they know the power of these muskets? But now they saw the power of these new muskets with their own eyes. They only had half of the strength of the cavalrymen, but they were able to withstand the pressure of the enemy. The enemy did not dare to charge past the last 400 meters, forming a natural chasm of death. It was no wonder that the sixth young master had been so calm and confident. It was no wonder that they were able to achieve a great victory without injuring a single person when dealing with the 2,000 cavalrymen of the Jianzhou left guards. It was no wonder that the Cold Vanguard soldiers, who were infantrymen, were so arrogant when facing the faster and fiercer cavalrymen. It turned out that this was their trump card and their true combat strength. Sighs, admiration, envy, and all kinds of emotions burst out at this moment. At the same time, depression, fear, and trembling emotions appeared one by one on the Nuzen cavalrymen. In just a short while, 600 to 700 of the 3,000 cavalrymen had died in battle. This was because they had stopped moving forward in time. Otherwise, there would have been even more people who would have died. Faced with this unexpected situation, Borte and Hu Lu were at a loss as to what to do. They were at a loss as to what to do next. Heaven and earth were not benevolent, but they would always leave people with a chance to live. Just like now, after receiving Tiger's Mane's signal, Beta Persei put down the black and red flags in his hand and shouted loudly, "Listen up, our young master is benevolent and will give you a way to live. Put down your weapons and lead your horses out to surrender. Otherwise, we will kill 10 of you every minute until you are completely wiped out. Choose for yourself whether you want to live or die." Beta Persei repeated his words twice to make sure that the other party could hear him clearly. Only then did he close his mouth in satisfaction. Although he did not move a finger in today's battle, nor did he kill a single person, he felt extremely good in his heart. Think about it. He was the one who made the flag signals, which gave him the feeling of commanding an army of thousands of men and horses. He was the one who persuaded them to surrender, which gave him the feeling of being in control of life. And no matter which one it was enough to satisfy Beta Persei. Yes, Beta Persei was persuading them to surrender, which was naturally Yang Qindong's intention. In order to reach into the Wallace territory, the front line was thousands of miles away, so there was naturally no need to count on replenishing the troops. In such an environment, how to create his own forces and achieve the mission of military goals became the problem that Yang Qindong needed to think about. After thinking about it for a long time, strengthening the army became a must. Without enough troops, not to mention whether they could win the war, who would be able to defend the territory they had conquered. People were the foundation of development, and Yang Qindong put this idea on the Nuzen cavalry. This was an ambitious tribe, as well as a horse-riding tribe with powerful combat strength. In later generations, there was a saying that the Nuzen were undefeatable, but that was a matter for the future. Right now, they were only focusing on the small piece of land in front of them. Now, they were still thinking about how to survive and develop. Take them under your wing before they have any ambitions. Then, they won't be a hindrance to your development in the future. Instead, they will only be of help. Setting up this trap was to absorb more captives from the Nuzen cavalry. This was why Beta Persei shouted, and why Borte was in a dilemma. Beta Persei's roar spread out, but there was no immediate answer. After all, to be able to become a cavalry, they were somewhat proud. It was unrealistic to expect them to surrender in the face of difficulties. Of course, if they surrendered so easily, it would be difficult for such an army to achieve anything, and they would not be valued by Yang Chendong. After 2 rounds of fighting, the battlefield fell into a strange silence again. After a minute of silence, the members of the Ghost sniper team opened fire. They did not use their usual sniper rifle, but the most common type 81 assault rifle to begin their roll call journey. Bang, bang, bang. Bang, bang, bang. Exactly 10 gunshots were fired, and 10 Nuzen cavalry, who did not know what happened, fell from their horses. One by one, they were shot in the forehead and fell to the ground. Very good. Get ready for the next group. Captain Baizwa said slowly, sighing in his heart. This kind of training with real people as targets is definitely the best opportunity to improve the marksmanship of his team members. This will also greatly overcome the psychological barrier when they kill people. At this moment, he even thought that it would be best if these Nuzen cavalry did not surrender. In this way, his team members will have more opportunities for actual combat training. They really dare to kill people. 10 people were really killed. Some of the more attentive ones even counted the number of deaths. As the screams continued, the expressions of the Nuzen cavalrymen turned ugly. Some of them even intentionally hid behind the people around them. Clearly, they were looking for a human shield. Bang, 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 bang. Another minute passed, and another 10 Nuzen cavalry were killed on their horses, causing a commotion and chaos. The unpredictable marksmanship of the Ghost sniper team has completely destroyed the psychological defense of the Nuzen cavalry. More and more people looked at Borte or Hulu after seeing this kind of gaze many times. Even the 2 generals couldn't help but feel scared. Especially Borte. Some of the cavalry near him have already pulled out their sabers and were eager to fight. It seems that if they do not surrender in the next breath, they will cut them down. You're tuning into the Mystic Fist YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.